People were walking along the street of the city and through the doors of old man Yang's shop. Many of them heard a man asking a young man what happened to his hand and whether this disease was contagious. Something really strange was going on with the guy's hand. It was covered with an incomprehensible blue spot, which over time became larger and apparently caused its wearer severe discomfort. Then the young guy with the stain said that this thing on his body is the simplest allergy to jerks with whom he has to contact every day. Then this guy gave the phone to the merchant of the Yang shop and asked how much money he could give him for giving him this phone. The seller from the shop carefully, narrowing his eyes slightly, studied the object and confidently said that he could give 300 for it. The man with the spot obviously didn't like such a low price very much, and he turned to the merchant, ominously said that a new mobile phone like this costs as much as 2,000, and this one has never even been used, so it's unfair to give only some 300 coins for it. Then the man from Yan's shop said that he was giving 300 only because the young guy was a frequent customer here. Besides, the merchant said that the guy probably got this phone in some not entirely legal way, because he hadn't even deleted the old owner's data from the phone. The guy with the spot was very scared when he heard these words and immediately excitedly tried to take the phone out of the hands of the shop owner. However, he did not give the phone back, but only sarcastically said that, judging by how scared his client was, he clearly stole the phone from someone he knew. The shop owner asked if it was really the girl's phone. The young man with the stain on his hand abruptly looked away and told the merchant to stop talking nonsense and just give him money. The merchant of the shop handed the money to the customer. The guy with the stain abruptly snatched it out and, grabbing the stain on his hand, walked away from the shop. At this time, Ye Lan had just entered the shop. When the young guy was leaving, they bumped into Lan at the door and both stopped for a moment, turned around, and Ye Lan looked behind him. Then he looked at the shopkeeper and said that he had called him not so long ago, and he told him that he had a book that Ye Lan really needed. The owner was sitting on his chair and was very surprised that he and the young man had just talked and he had already come to the shop so quickly. Ye Lan said that there was absolutely nothing unusual about this, and then asked if the merchant had cheated him. The seller immediately justified himself by saying that all this is just nonsense, and of course he has a copy of the book, but he will only sell it for a price slightly higher than previously agreed. The merchant also said that the guy should wait a little because the book still needs to be found. While the shopkeeper Yang was looking for a book, he said that he raised the price for a reason. The problem was that he personally went to the village to get this book, and it cost him a lot of effort. Then he went on to say that there is a very high demand for this book now, and that it is difficult to predict the market situation now. The young man at this time approached the merchant's table and picked up the phone that was lying on it. Ye Lan thought that this phone must have been handled quite carefully, since there are no signs of wear on it at all. The phone was clean and completely chipped. The wallpaper and all the data were personalized. The shopkeeper Yang turned around just as the customer was holding the phone and asked what the young man was doing. Ye Lan didn't answer anything, but just continued to study the phone carefully and turn it in his hands. The merchant of the shop said that he could give this phone away if only the guy wanted to take it, and promised not to inflate the price too much. He asked what Ye Lan thought about it. Then the student agreed. Meanwhile, the man with the stain went to Master Lu's clinic and wondered if the people he was having fun with were contagious, since he had a strange stain on his arm. The mark on it didn't hurt at all, and it didn't even itch, but this young man just felt that it was hard for him to move. Waddling from one foot to the other, the guy came to Master Lu's clinic, but came across a sign there that the clinic had already moved to another place, and was asked to call the phone number listed below, if anything. The young man was not very happy and therefore forcefully kicked the door of the clinic, and shouted that, as always, it happened at the most inopportune time. Suddenly an old man approached him from behind unnoticed and asked if the young man needed an examination. The guy was very scared and jumped slightly, and then turned around to face the old man. He asked if the old man had accidentally wanted to scare him to death. An old man invited a guy with a stain on his arm into the room and said that he had already found a new place for the clinic, and this building would soon be demolished. Then the old man added that he returned to this clinic only because he forgot something, and it turned out very well. The patient sat down on the couch and the old doctor asked what complaints he had. The young man replied that a strange spot suddenly appeared on his hand for no reason. An old man approached his patient, took his hand and looked closely at the stain on the guy's hand. The patient asked the doctor if it was possible to isolate it somehow, and said that he had read on the internet that it was purple eczema, and it was getting bigger. The old doctor carefully examined the patient and thought, and then let go of his hand. The patient asked again if it was being treated somehow. Then the guy asked if this was what he had read about on the internet. The doctor turned away, went somewhere and said that almost everything was being written on the internet. Then the owner of the clinic came up to the shelves and said that there were no medicines, no needles, no suitable equipment, so he probably could not stand the patient in any way. Dr. Liu added that in any case, something terrible will happen in a couple of days. Then the patient left the clinic and returned to his home. In his room, he finally lay down on the bed and started looking for something on the phone. He was thinking that the stain on his hand was getting bigger. The guy was angry at old Dr. Liu and thought that he had just wasted a lot of his time on him. He added that getting into a state hospital is now a real problem, because you need to first enter phone data in order to get all the relevant information. The young man was looking for the definition of the word purple on the internet. Some Mr. Doctor answered him that purple is an accumulation of blood under the skin and this problem can be solved with the help of the most ordinary needle. But if you start this case, then everything can lead to very serious consequences. Then the young man immediately remembered the words of the attending doctor about needles and decided that he should try. The young man got out of bed, opened the closet, found a needle in it and went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, the guy turned on the fire and heated a sharp needle in it. He was already covered in sweat and finally finished and took the needle out of the flame. Then the young man sharply poked the needle directly into the spot and screamed in pain. Blood flowed from his hand, but the stain became a little smaller and the guy, smiling, decided that everything had worked. He regretted that he had been nervous all day because of some nonsense. The young man wiped the blood with napkins and thought that it didn't look very good, but it would be a great reason for him to get a big tattoo on his arm. The happy man went into the bedroom and fell back on the bed, thinking that now he could finally sleep. Suddenly, he felt something prick him and took out some kind of sharp metal thing that wounded him to the point of bleeding. But not much. The guy thought that there was nothing wrong with that, threw it in the trash and decided to continue sleeping. Suddenly, in the middle of a dream, the young man felt not very well. He gritted his teeth, got up from the soft bed, turned on the light in the room and went to the mirror. In the reflection, the young guy saw that his entire arm and even part of his neck were covered with this blue spot, which he thought he had already got rid of. The guy was very scared, looked through the mirror at his back and saw that this blue spot appeared on his back. The mark was getting bigger and this man, in fear and misunderstanding, rushed to look again for the needle that he had already used before. But while he was rushing around the room, he fell to the floor. It was already too late, and there was clearly nothing the needle could do. Then the young man grabbed a huge carving knife in the kitchen and began to cut himself in the spots, demanding that it be cleaned immediately. But that didn't work either and he didn't get any better. The guy was crying and didn't understand what was going on. The stain had already grown on his face. Then the young man stabbed himself in the face with a knife and screamed. At this time, Ye Lan was walking down the corridor in a red raincoat and thought that the food for Jia Zhuo would be very tasty. He said that Lan Zhu should taste the guilt for his deed, and Bo Kai will purify. The guest came to the door and said that no one wanted to starve, then knocked with his fist and asked if anyone was at home. The guy with the stain heard people asking if there was someone at home. He was lying on the floor and holding his face with his hands, unable to say anything. Then the landlord shouted a request for help and Ye Lan heard him. The man in red said that people still seem to be forcing the 12 gods to chase spirits. Then Ye Lan opened the door and saw a young guy lying on the floor in his own apartment. Lan came closer to the guy and said that the physical condition directly depends on the mental, so it's worth separating the mundane from the spiritual. The young man was still shouting loudly, and the uninvited guest said that he should not hurry because he himself gives strength to the spot, so he should just stop it. The owner of the apartment was still holding his face with his hands and shouting. Then he raised his head, looked at Ye Lan and his eyes lit up blue, and then the guy rushed to attack Lan. But the man in red managed to recoil and showed the spirit that was in the guy some kind of doll. Ye Lan touched the toy and the guy with the stain fell to the floor. Lan came even closer to the guy who was kneeling and looking at the floor. Suddenly, some kind of incomprehensible blue energy appeared from the back of this young man and he raised his head. So Ye Lan exorcised the spirit from the guy and he lowered his head to the floor again. Ye Lan then drew a symbol in the air and slammed it into the floor. Then he put there the same phone that he had recently bought in Old Man Yang's shop. He continued to conjure something and the stain was removed even more from the body of its bearer while rising up to the ceiling. At the height it became not blue, but somehow even black. The guy was lying on the floor at that time. There was some kind of seal on Ye Lan's neck. Some voice said that the man in red should let him in, even though he didn't want them to be one. Then Ye Lan brought his palms together and stood up straight. A large amount of spiritual energy concentrated around him. He combined his red energy with the blue energy of the spot and they finally connected. The young man was twisting his hands and something was happening with the energies. They somehow interacted with each other. Then Ye Lan twisted his palms again several times and some kind of beast appeared in the energies. The voice in his head started talking again and asked if the man in red really wanted to spend all his energy, but wouldn't even let him share the writing with him. Then he added that the soul of this guy with a stain could not be saved anyway, and no one would say thank you for that. The spirit in the body mocked its master very much, so the vessel asked him to shut up. Some strange huge monster appeared from the energies, which looked at Ye Lan, but the dough continued to conjure until the monster wanted to attack him. Then the guy in red said that he would completely destroy him step by step, because he had no other choice. Ye Lan continued to do what he was doing slowly, and so, a flame appeared around his hand. He continued to exorcise the demon and finally grabbed it in his hand. A wooden figure of a body appeared in his palm. Ye Lan told his voice inside that he was telling him that the guy clearly could not be saved and put the figure in a black handkerchief. The spirit in his body replied that he thought the owner would be scared if he said so, but alas, nothing like that happened and the spirit was wrong. At this time, the guy with the spot woke up. He looked at his named guest, got scared and jumped up. Ye Lan squatted down next to the guy and asked if he had killed a man. The man with the mutilated face shouted that he had not killed anyone and this was his house at all. The voice said that this young man's soul would definitely taste delicious. The owner of the house opened his eyes wide and saw a red demon in front of him who wanted to devour him. He was very scared and screamed, but the spirit said that he should relax his flesh and soul a little, because he would not go anywhere anyway. The red monster said that the guy belongs to the spirit and opened his mouth wide and wanted to devour the guy. The young man was shouting loudly, and the guy in the red suit was already walking down the corridor at that time and only turned around briefly. Zhang Zihua, the Taoist magician Lun Huashan, coordinator of the specialized executive office in Qiongqi, came with his group to the scene of yesterday's murder. The man said that due to drug intoxication, the suspect started hallucinating. He and his girlfriend had a big fight and, as a result, the suspect stabbed the girl with a knife. Zhang Zihua continued and said that the girl's body was dismembered and thrown into several garbage chutes. And, since the demolition of this residential building is planned next month, of course no one would look into the garbage chute, and by that time all the evidence would have already been destroyed. Zai Hua read all this from a sheet written by a man named Qiongqi. Zhang Zihua said that Qiongqi would not be able to add what happened in this room last night. His colleague Xingjiada, a master of the Kai school, a first-class employee of a specialized center, approached the magician and said that of course Qiongqi would not be able to tell them anything anymore. Xingjiada then added that it had been raining every now and then lately. The humidity was high, so the building would definitely be demolished, and most of the old residents had already moved in. Then Xingjiada looked at Zai Hua and said that the girl had suffered such a terrible abuse as dismemberment, died in the arms of a loved one. So of course anger and hatred did not envelop her, which then appeared on the guy's body as a stain, a trace of the presence of an evil spirit. He also added that as soon as the evil spirit settled in the body of this girl, her brain instantly shut down. The Taoist sighed heavily and said that he had seen this guy before the incident, and he always had some imperfections, which is not surprising given his image and place of life. Then he added that what he had just seen was very surprising and it did not seem that a simple purple was capable of it. Zhang Zihua asked Miss Shen Feilai if she had found anything, because he had heard that it was said that thanks to her special ability of compensation, she could see what had happened before. Shen Feilai, who has superpowers and is an employee of a specialized department of the second rank, said she could try. The girl walked around the room and began to use her ability to find out at least something about the incident. Shen Feilai said that the belief concentration of the sinister purple energy here was much higher, so dense that it could quite turn into an entity. The girl added that in accordance with the standards of a special unit, much more people are needed to carry out such a mission. Xingjiada replied that this was not always the case. Taoist Zai Hua gestured to his partner that he should be a little quieter. Shen Feilai continued to study the place and said that after the girl's body was thrown into the garbage chute, the parasitic evil spirit had accumulated enough negative energy to release such a force. However, it only took some 10 minutes to dissipate this evil energy. Shen Feilai put her hand to her head and said that there was a person in the house who used a spirit, spells like earth. The girl clearly felt the scent of river sand. Then the young girl added that there was a man in red who looked very young, but she could not see his face at all. He was as if wearing a mask. Suddenly, Shen Feilai saw some kind of scary monster and screamed loudly out of fear. She bounced and fell to the floor. Zai Hua and Xingjiada immediately ran up to the girl. Zhang Zihua used some kind of talisman to help Shen Feilai regain consciousness. Finally, Shen Feilai came to her senses and took a sitting position on the floor. She said that it seemed to her that the one who exorcised the purple spirit yesterday had artifacts of the yellow rank. But in her subconscious there was only a sinister expression on the monster's face, and nothing else. The girl closed her eyes and lost the back of her head. Zhang Zihua looked at the tired girl with pity and said that she had worked very hard. The master of the school of Kai said that the incidents with the rank of yellow really require special attention. But he asked if this situation has anything to do with their case. Then he added that if this is not the case, then they better not run into trouble. Xingjiada also said that they were all here only because the armillary sphere that belongs to the unit detected an increased concentration of aura in Qiongqi. And only 4 months later, when the concentration had already exceeded the average level, the unit decided to send them to investigate. Xingjiada asked if Zhang Zihua and Shen Feilai would like to ask him to help with the murder investigation by chance, because just observing the situation is enough for them. It was obvious from the master of the school of Kai that he clearly did not want to help in the investigation of the murder. Shen Feilai said she still doesn't know if the one who dealt with purple yesterday has anything to do with their mission. Then Xingjiada turned away from them and said that strange things were constantly happening all over the country, and you couldn't keep track of everything. He just laughed at the fact that these two were seriously thinking about staying here and catching ghosts. Then Xingjiada and Feilai said they were already leaving. The girl asked the magician Zai Hua to let them know if he had any news. They parted on the stairs, and Zhang Zihua was left standing there alone. The Taoist magician could not get Shen Feilai's words about red clothes and the smell of river sand out of his head. He was thinking about the demonic mask and the soul eater. Zai Hua thought he seemed to know what it was. He wrote the number 9 to the contact who was recorded in the phone as the master. He replied that magician Zhang should not do anything yet, and he would soon come to him in Zhongcheng. The message said that there would be a major comic book exhibition in Zhongcheng next month, and he would drop by Zhang Zai Hua at the same time. The Taoist thought that this 2D crazy old man perceives the incident of the red level as something completely ordinary, and was a little angry. Zhang Zihua wrote to the master that he understood everything. In the past, when Ye Lan was still a young child, there was a big fire in his house. People ran to extinguish the flames that had already engulfed the entire dwelling, and Ye Lan walked away from the house. He was walking and suddenly someone put a hand on his shoulder and then asked where he was going. The man's hands were bony and there was a ring on one of his fingers. The doe turned his head, looked at his shoulder and saw this golden ring. Then little Ye Lan remembered that his grandfather had told him to go as far as possible and not look back. The boy replied that he was going to his home. Then the man asked him where his house was and said he could take him to the police. The man leaned closer to the child and Lan immediately said that his surname was not Fan and this was not his family's home. Then the man said that he must have made a mistake and removed his hand from the boy's shoulder. So Ye Lan finally went far away from home. He was walking all alone in the dark forest. He was cold and very scared. The child was very scared, but walked forward and was shaking from the cold. The boy began to cry out of fear and covered his mouth with his hands so as not to make too loud noises. Tears flowed from the boy's eyes like a stream. Then Ye Lan finally walked through the entire forest and came out on the busy street of the city. Everything was decorated with bright lanterns and signs. Masked people were singing and dancing merrily. Lan thought that all this was completely wrong, and that all these things were just autosuggestion and they definitely could not scare away ghosts. He thought they were there on the mountain, and he heard them perfectly. The child was still walking and crying, looking at all these happy people. It was then that Ye Lan decided that he would be all alone forever from now on. And the deer ran away. When Ye Lan came to the house, he was sitting at the table and thought that he should rather draw that ring that he saw that man wearing during the fire. The boy drew a ring on a piece of paper from memory and suddenly felt some sharp pain in his shoulder. Then he turned the mirror on himself, pushed the t-shirt away and looked at what he had there. On the shoulder, closer to the neck, the child saw a clear handprint. Suddenly, there was a knock on Ye Lan's door, and he went to open it. They said outside the door that it was express delivery. The owner of the apartment opened the door, but there was no one there. He lowered his head and saw a box on the floor. Then I immediately opened it and saw in it a folk decoration of Qiongqi, a mask. Ye Lan brought the box into the room, took out the package and abruptly threw it on the floor, shouting that this thing was simply useless. Then the boy looked at his hand and saw strange marks on it, which, according to his memories, were definitely not there a minute ago. These black stripes appeared on the very hand with which he was holding that very mask. Then Lan thought that it was probably this package. He walked over to the mask that was lying on the floor, sat down and put his hand on the mask. Then he accidentally put his finger in the mouth of this mask and it bit him. There were some patterns on his hand. He screamed and the mask began to constantly say his name. Then Ye Lan was already sitting at his desk at school, and the teacher asked him to go to the blackboard. The dissatisfied student still went to the teacher, took the chalk and began to solve the task. The teacher sternly and attentively looked at Ye Lan at the blackboard. Lan quickly completed the task and went back to sit at his desk. The teacher immediately began to check his decision. Ye Lan looked at his hand and thought that what he saw on that person's wrist yesterday was very similar to what he saw 3 years ago. At first he decided that it might well have something to do with that spirit, the owner of the ring, but it seems it was not so at all. The student went to another class at recess, opened the door and asked Su Maizu to talk to him for a while. The girl of course agreed and everyone in the class started giggling and whispering. Su Maizu went out into the corridor and Ye Lan handed her some kind of box. Maizu asked what kind of box it was. Ye Lan said that he had taken cinnabar from her and it was very useful for him. Su Maizu said that it was all very unexpected and she was surprised that Ye Lan had already used it all. Then Su Mai said that Ye Lan probably works a lot, and added that when you draw using only one color, it turns out very expressive. Su Mai said that the painting red over the mountains as if the forests are dying is painted in the same way, and it is actually very beautiful. The girl kept talking to Ye Lan. At that moment, a guy named Ki Bokeo was standing behind him and clenched his hands into fists out of anger. Apparently he liked Su Maizu very much. When the guy passed by Ye Lan, he wanted to push him in the shoulder with his shoulder on purpose, but Ye Lan managed to dodge and nothing like that happened. Then the guy looked at Ye Lan angrily and asked what class he was from. The guy again asked where Ye Lan was from and said that he was actually talking to him now. Then Ye Lan replied that he was a high school student. Suddenly, Su Maizu stood in front of Ye Lan, facing that guy and said that they should stop acting like that. The guy was clearly unhappy, but listened to his classmate Su Mai, turned around and walked away from them. Ye Lan told Su Maizu that he has many other beauties. They came to him from his grandfather and if Zhu needs something, he can give her just like that. The guy also added that you definitely can't buy such paints on the internet now. The guy who became attached to Ye Lan and his gang grabbed another guy, whose name was Sun Mao, and went somewhere with him. Student Yi was very wary of this and looked at the gang of school children with suspicion and distrust. Then Su Maizu said that this guy's name was Ki Bokeo, and he was from her class. She added that Bokeo seemed to have watched gangster movies and constantly behaved provocatively, so she advised Ye Lan to just ignore this guy. But Su Mai said that in fact her classmate is not a bad person at all. Lan did not respond to these words. Then he just told the girl that everything was clear to him and walked away from her, and she stood behind, watched the departing guy and thought that she again did not have time to ask Ye Lan for his WeChat for communication outside of school. At this time, Ki Bokeo and his gang dragged the guy to a secluded place and threw him on the floor. They realized that it was probably he who told the teacher that they were smoking. Ki Bokeo said that he heard it with his own ears when he passed by the teacher's office. One of Ki Bokeo's guys grabbed Seng Mao by the collar and asked if it was worth taping his mouth by accident. Then the guy shouted that they should just beat this guy, and Bokeo asked how this guy still dares to put sticks in their wheels. They called Sun Mao a jerk, and he cried with fear and shrank all over. Then 4 guys started kicking him on the floor. At this time, Ye Lan came into the room and saw Ki Bokeo and his friends beating the poor guy with 4 of them. One of them said that for some reason every movement is given to him with great difficulty. The evil energy of spirits hovered over the bodies of these guys, which absorbed emotions from them. The guy who was brutally beaten was screaming loudly in pain. Then Ye Lan said that he could not even think that it would be so lively here. The evil spirits that hovered over the gang of these school children turned and looked at Lan. He walked further along the gym and opened the curtains wide on the window. The bright sun seeped into the building. All the evil spirits immediately disappeared through another door, away from the busy sun. Ye Lan asked if the teacher had accidentally sent these guys to get mats for a physical education lesson. Ki Bokeo turned around and looked at Ye Lan. Lan stood next to the guys and said that there wasn't much time left before the lesson started. Then Bokeo said that Ye Lan should not poke his nose into other people's affairs, and one of the gang guys shouted to Ki Bokeo that their delivery was already at the gate. The leader and his gang of school children decided to leave, and the beaten guy remained lying in the gym. Ye Lan stayed in the hall with him. When everyone left, Ye Lan came over and took one of the mats. The guy introduced himself and told a new acquaintance that his name was Sun Mao, and then sincerely thanked Ye for helping with the Ki Bokeo gang. Ye Lan just said something briefly and nodded, and then asked Sun Mao to help him carry the mat to the first floor for a physical education lesson, since it would be a little difficult for him to do it alone. Mao came over to help and asked if this mat was really needed for a physical education lesson. When Ye Lan and Sun Mao were carrying a mat together to the first floor, Lan asked if Mao was going to tell the teacher that he had just been beaten by Kibo Ko's gang. The guy thought about it, and then sadly said that even if he told the teacher about everything, no one would expel these guys from the school gang anyway. Telling parents is also not a very good option, since guys like them probably won't be afraid of their parents either. Sun Mao believed that in this case, these guys would only hate him even more and maybe even beat him up again. Ye Lan looked at his new friend and Sun Mao said that he probably shouldn't talk so much. At that time, at the physical education lesson, the teacher asked the students if any of them had seen Ye Lan's classmate, because he seemed to have decided to skip the physical education lesson again. Ye Lan was standing on the roof of the school at that time and looking down. A voice in his head said that he thought the guy would already start acting. Lan did not understand at what point it all started and replied that it was not the time yet, because there were too many extra eyes. The young man began to think about why the spirits began to gather in packs, because it could become a problem for him. Then Ye Lan asked his voice if he had any ideas, and the voice said that the owner definitely should not ask him about it. Ye Lan asked if the 4,000-year-old spirit in him was acting up like a little kid because he wouldn't let him eat the purple witch yesterday. The spirit replied that he just wanted to say that Ye Lan should finally understand that he cannot control the rebirth of evil spirits, and if he has a lot of free time and has nothing to do at all, he should better think about how to find that person with the ring. Ye Lan said that besides all this, the spirit probably just doesn't like to eat henchmen spirits, and the spirit replied that this is indeed one of the reasons. Then the spirit added that it was better to just transfer to another school than to try to deal with all this. The young man replied that if he had a choice, he really would not want to do something like that, and he added that yesterday he had a very hard day, but there was nothing to be done about it. Besides, it was the only school that was so close to Lan's house. With that, Ye Lan walked back from the roof. Just by this time, the Taoist magician Zhang Zihua arrived at the number 3 high school in Cheng City by taxi. He thanked the driver, paid the fare, and got out of the taxi. Magician Zihua stood in front of the school and thought that in order to find at least some clues about the man in red clothes who was involved in last night's incident, he would have to sweat very seriously. The Taoist knew that the victim himself had not mentioned anything at all about the man in red clothes, and since Shen Feilai's rebirth ability did not give any specifics about this situation, they still lack some specifics and details to the case. Fortunately, Zhang Zihua was able to find out information about the murdered girl from her friend, and that Yangzi with the phone of the murdered girl went to Old Man Yang's commission shop. It was there that Taoist Zihua found out that a high school student whose name is Ye Lan then bought the phone of the murdered girl. Zhang Zihua was holding a phone with a photo of Ye Lan, a student of the number 3 high school in Cheng City. Although, in fact, magician Zihua did not think at all that high school student Ye Lan was somehow involved in what happened last night, and the case to which the red rank was assigned. Zhang Zihua had already approached the booth where the guard was sleeping soundly and thought that if he did not do any work at all and did not learn at least something, then he would obviously have to listen to lectures from the master later. The Taoist magician knocked on the guard's booth, greeted him and said that he was the parent of one of the students, but the guard was probably sleeping very soundly, so he did not answer. Then he decided that he was just quietly sneaking inside the school himself. When Zhang Zihua went to school, he passed by one of the classes and thought that the students were very serious and the future of the whole country was in them. The man knew that Ye Lan's class must be here somewhere. At that moment, a guard approached Zhang Zihua from behind. Zihua turned around, apologized and said that he had knocked on his window and asked if he could show his documents now. But the guard said that Zhang Zihua was already late. Suddenly, the guard seemed to go mad. He shouted again and again that Zhang was late, and that everyone would find out, and then rushed at the man. Students with strange faces looked out of the classroom window, watching the guard chasing Zhang Zihua. Zhang Zihua rushed to run along the corridor from the distraught guard. Suddenly, the man managed to grab Zhang Zihua by the arm and slightly tore his shirt sleeve in the shoulder area. Then Zhang Zihua got angry, grabbed the old guard by the arm, turned to him and asked if he knew how much this suit cost. Dao's knocked the guard to the floor and said it was too much. The guard grabbed Zhang's arm again and flipped him over and threw him on the floor. Zihua thought that it would definitely not go that way and landed on his feet and used the spiritual gaze spell. Through this spell, Zhang Zihua was able to see that the old guard was possessed by a henchman spirit. When Zai Hua looked at the disciples, he saw that they were all possessed. He wondered why there were so many of these spirits here. Then the frightened man again rushed to run about the ferocious guard, but the guard caught up with him and tripped him up. Zhang realized that when a person is possessed by a spirit, he apparently ceases to feel any pain. The Taoist magician jumped over the guard, grabbed him and used the spell of the poisonous dragon and the white tiger to separate the entities and called on the patron spirit to protect the true self of this old guard. After that, Zai Hua calmly released the old man and he remained standing there with his head lowered to the floor. Then the guard fell to the floor and started shouting loudly, and then turned to Zhang Zai Hua and attacked him again. Magician Zhang didn't understand what was going on at all and abruptly jumped back, once again being behind the old guard. At that moment, Zhang Zihua saw the students possessed by the henchman spirits again. They jumped out into the corridor through the classroom windows and were eager to attack Zihua. They all looked just awful and very sinister. There were a lot of them and Zhang prepared to repel the attacks. Suddenly, one of the students attacked a visitor to their school, and he fell out of the school window. Zhang Zihua landed on the ground. It was raining outside and it was very damp. After Zhang Zihua, a student also fell out of the window. When Zhang stood up and prepared to fight, he suddenly saw Ye Lan in front of him. Taoist Zai Hua was very surprised, and Ye Lan said that now was not the time for any thanks, and if he wanted to save his life, then he should follow him. Ye Lan rushed to run, and Magician Zhang ran after him and shouted, asking what other thanks, and why Ye Lan was not possessed by an evil spirit at all, like the rest of the students of this school. The guy turned around and said that Zhang Zihua of course should thank him for saving him. Then Zai Hua asked if the collision from the second floor was a rescue. Ye Lan said that it doesn't matter at all now and that those who possess superpowers by default do not receive damage from falling at the peak of spiritual energy concentration. Zhang said it was the first time he had ever heard of it and that he had received quite a few injuries from Ye Lan's kick. The rest of the students of the school began to throw themselves out of the windows, go out through the doors and all ran after the student and Zai Hua. Then Ye Lan said that since his original plan had failed because of Magician Zhang, then he would have to follow another plan. Plan B. Ye Lan began to wrap some white cloth around his arm. Zhang Zihua approached a student he had only recently met and said that the danger that was happening here was approaching the orange rank, so he had already sent his colleagues their coordinates and a brief description of the situation. But for now they should just find a safe place for themselves and wait for help. Ye Lan said that there are no safe places at all in this school, and since the reason for what happened now cannot be revealed, he will have to act in his usual way. Ye Lan asked if Taoist Zai Hua had seen what had happened, and the magician grabbed the student by the shoulder and said that it was completely pointless and, moreover, they should not harm the students of the school. One of the demon-possessed wanted to attack them from behind, and Ye Lan abruptly pushed Zai Hua aside and pushed the possessed. The disciple fell to the ground, and Taoist Zhang asked what it was. Ye Lan explained that what he wrapped around his hands causes a ritual sign of the sun, the energy of which absorbs the energy of full daylight. And these creatures are afraid of sunlight much more than ordinary ghosts. The schoolboy hit one of the possessed students again. A bright light came from his hands. He said it should work and hit another obsessed student. Then Zhang realized that his new acquaintance had an artifact in his hands. Zhang Zihua also understood why they were here now. He thought that Ye Lan wanted to lure everyone out into the open and deal with them. Magician Zhang stood and watched as Lan beat the possessed evil spirits with his artifact. Zai Hua carefully observed all of these actions and noticed that when he wanted to strike, his fist stopped right a millimeter from the face of the possessed. Zai Hua decided that this definitely could not be a coincidence, because the ability to control the body like that is simply amazing, and it is clearly not something that Ye Lan could learn in a day or two. The disciple was fighting with the demon-possessed henchmen of the disciples. Zhang Zihua was sitting next to him and watching him very carefully. Zhang then said that Ye Lan's school is quite large and there are many students in it. Student Lan said that the teachers say that he should attend physical education classes, although even the guys possessed by the ghosts of henchmen cannot compete with him. He said that it is worth reviewing the values. Magician Zai Hua was not very pleased and got angry, because who is this strange disciple to say such things at all? Then Ye Lan said that even first-year students have to go to the evening shift, which is why there are always so many people here at this time. Lan turned around, looked at the magician and asked if he noticed that a black car with the number A44396 was passing by the gate of the main entrance to the school for the third time. High school student, he said that in his opinion, few people can be so interested in a fight of school children near the school in the middle of the night, so it's very suspicious. Then Zhang Zihua asked if it was an illusion. Zai Hua was very surprised at Ye Lan. while scattering all the possessed people right and left at the school, also managed to observe the situation outside. When Ye Lan was finally done with the possessed, he walked up to the school gate and examined everything carefully. The magician Zai Hua remained sitting in the same place. Ye Lan disappeared into the portal at the gate and appeared behind Zai Hua and told him that this was some kind of vicious circle. Then disciple Yi shouted the same thing again and ran near magician Zhang, then abruptly ran up to his phone and asked what time it was in general. It was 3 minutes past 8 on the clock. Both guys were very surprised at how time passed. Taoist Zai Hua thought that it would take at least half an hour to walk from the train station to the school. The passage of time may feel different, and this is quite normal. However, Zai Hua knew exactly how long it took for his spiritual energy to recover, and this definitely could not happen in a matter of minutes. Zhang Zihua looked at Ye Lan and said that time and space are definitely distorted here, and then asked if it could be because of the spirits. Disciple Lan said that he was just an ordinary high school student, and asked why Mag Zhang was asking him about it at all. Then Zhang Zihua started writing something on the phone, and Ye Lan asked if he understood that even if he could send something, they could not be sure that it would get to the right address. Then Ye Lan told Zhang Zihua to wait for him here, and he would go look around and try to find the source of the illusion. But Taoist Zai Hua stopped him and said that he wanted to do the same, because as Senior Yi himself said, he was just an ordinary high school student, so he should have left this matter to the professionals. The deer turned around, looked at his new acquaintance again and said that he did not look too reliable, so I would not like him to get in the way. Zhang then asked if the student didn't think it was possible to behave more delicately. Then Zai Hua added that he was bound hand and foot by the provision of the organization's charter, according to which, after using superpowers, he was obliged to provide a report the size of a long treatise. He said that all this will be painted and sewn in next year, but if their opponents are just ordinary demons, everything is much easier. Zhang Zihua smoothed his hair and said that he was going to show what it means to be a professional in his field. But, while magician Zai Hua was making his speeches, Ye Lan had already left long ago and magician Zhang was looking around trying to find him. When Zhang finally noticed Lan's disciple, he shouted that it was better for him not to act alone and ran to him. But Zhang Zihua stepped through the portal and found himself back in the corridor of the school. It seemed that someone unfriendly was heading straight towards him. Taoist Zai Hua asked who it was. There was a whole crowd of demons right in front of him, and then he saw an old guard dragging something heavy up the stairs. Then the guard abruptly threw some kind of pedestal at Mag Zihua. Zhang Zihua understood perfectly well that it didn't matter what rank all these spirits were, because they were still just ordinary high school students who were influenced. Magician Zai Hua managed to catch the heavy pedestal with his hand and it even cracked. To do this, Zhang Zai Hua called for the help of some kind of spirit that exorcises evil. Zhang thought that he seemed to be underestimated here. At this time, Ye Lan was also walking along the corridor of the school. He felt some kind of magical barrier, and the spirit in him also felt it. The spirit said that according to his calculations, the male magician must have been dead for a long time. But Ye Lan said that most likely it would not come to that, because Zhang Zai Hua is a Taoist magician of the Way of Heavenly Mentors school, and he added that the spirit just probably does not understand this. The spirit said that these were two big words. Student E found two school children sitting on the floor in the room, but he paid no attention to them. The voice said that one good idea came to his mind. The demons themselves are henchmen, quite quiet and harmless. However, they become active if their carrier is some kind of evil spirits or a vicious person. By this, the spirit wanted to say that such a number of demons could well be provoked by a very nasty and delicious soul. Lan said he was very surprised that the spirit had thought of something so banal. Then Ye Lan added that he used to think that the spirit was very angry with him for yesterday, but now he realized for sure that he was just too stupid. The student thought that even if there was one instigator, he would simply not be physically able to create a magic barrier, the radius of which would be enough for the entire territory of their school. As soon as Ye Lan entered the school, he already had a strange feeling, so he decided that everything was not as simple as it might seem. Senior Yi entered one of the classrooms and saw the students there, who were still sitting at their desks. He would approach and use his attribute on each of them, poking them in the head and they would fall asleep. Then the guy stopped at one of the students. It was his old acquaintance, Sun Mao. Ye Lan thought about it and Mao looked at him, said that Lan was distracted and abruptly grabbed his hand. A beautiful young girl with long hair came to the Qiongqi Hotel in Qiongqi City. She went to the reception desk and asked which room an elderly man and a young woman lived in. The hotel employee apologized and said that they had no right to disclose the personal information of the guests of the Qiongqi hotel, and he also added that a huge number of people living in this hotel fit the described signs of the girl. The girl looked at her phone and then said that she understood everything perfectly and asked in this case to help her check into the room. When the girl finally got the keys to her room, she headed down the corridor in search of the number she needed. She looked around carefully, then went to one of the rooms and started using magic on the suitcase to move it. Finally, the visitor found the number she needed, stopped opposite and thought that she hadn't really listened to people during the meeting, so she didn't even know where the case materials might be. But, fortunately, so far everything has been going smoothly. The guest knocked on the room, no one answered her, and she put her ear to the door to listen to the sounds from the room. She heard some kind of vibration and immediately opened the door, ran into the room. It was a vibrating phone that was lying on the bed, and next to it, Shen Feilai was lying on the bed. The girl immediately ran up to her and saw, through the shirt, strange marks on Feil's body. She lifted the shirt a little and was surprised. Then the girl picked up the phone from the bed and put the fingerprint of the owner of the number to it. The phone was unlocked. The girl saw the geolocation marked in the correspondence. It was Zhang Zai Hua. At this time, at school, Ye Lan was standing and looking at his friend Sun Mao. He said he thought his friend was also possessed by an evil spirit, but it seems that this is not the case at all. A classmate told him that he was very scared when he saw these spirits for the first time, but soon realized that they understand each other perfectly, because they, too, are just poor creatures who are offended by evil people. There were a lot of evil spirits hovering around, and high school student Yi congratulated Sun Mao with a smile on his face that he had found many new friends. Then Lan added that it was not necessary to involve all the students of the school in this matter, but Sun Mao just laughed and threw the guy away from his desk. But, fortunately, he managed to react and did not fall, but landed on the teacher's desk and prepared for battle. Sun Mao began to lift objects in the classroom with his strength. He directed them at Ye Lan. Then with chairs he forged him against the wall, which even cracked. Mao's disciple said that he had gained incredible strength and asked Ye Lan what he thought a person who had been bullied by other people since childhood, all his life, would do with such strength. Mao asked Lan if he thought he would use his power to kill all those who bullied him and who pretended not to notice anything. Sun Mao smiled and said that of course he would not go to such extremes. He said he finally understood why people bully others, they just never experienced it on their own skin. All the spirits that were here are the souls of those who were beaten to death, and Sun Mao said that when they become one with the carriers, they will be able to experience all the sufferings suffered by the spirit during his lifetime, which is very convenient. Disciple Sun began to laugh hysterically loudly and say that this was a kind of purge so that everyone in this world would suffer torments, and everyone would feel better from it. Mao shouted that from today on he would let the whole world feel it on its own skin. Sun Mao was standing with his back to his friend. Ye Lan said that he thought these were the words of someone else and asked where Sun Mao heard them. Mao turned to disciple Yi, came closer and said that since Ye Lan also has the talent to see these spirits, he can join him and together they will make this world a much better place. High school student Sun Mao said that Ye Lan was not like all these people at all, so he felt that they could become great partners. Ye Lan tried to reason with his old friend. He shouted at him to come to his senses and not do anything stupid, because all this is just a hoax and these spirits are not at all as innocent as Sun Mao may seem. They just use him because he has a connection with them. Then Mao's disciple grabbed his head and said that communication was really not a very effective method to negotiate. Therefore, Mao said that he would just make Ye Lan feel everything for himself and directed a bunch of spirits at him. But the guy threw away the chairs and began to resist. The chairs flew back to the one who picked them up and the spirits too, and Lan said that he seemed to have forgotten to tell Sun Mao something. And Ye Lan said that compared to the creatures that live inside him, these spirits are very akin to harmless elves. Ye Lan wanted to summon his spirit, but the spirit said that he understood that the master wanted to introduce him to Mao, but he had already eaten so many spirits that he was already sick of them, so the master had to cope somehow on his own this time. Then Ye Lan grabbed his head, and then suddenly just smiled cheerfully and said that in no case should the effectiveness of communication be underestimated, because you can always express your opinion, all the dissatisfactions, and then come to a full understanding. But Sun Mao looked at his friend with disbelief, and then smiled slyly and said that it was very wrong to bring such a dangerous thing as an artifact of Ye Lan to school, because his friends were very worried about it. At that moment, a huge terrifying man appeared in the office, and Mao told him to tear their enemy apart. The ferocious man prepared to attack Ye Lan, while Sun Mao stood nearby and snickered viciously. Mao's disciple said that first he needed to take away Lan's dangerous thing and hid behind the wall while the monster attacked its victim. Ye Lan was a little indignant and rushed to run away from the monster through the door. He quickly ran out of the classroom, and the monster ran after him. When student Yi ran, he constantly looked around to know where his enemy was. At that moment, the doe turned to the spirit inside himself and asked if he would be there for a long time to digest everything. He asked him not to be so passive, because he is an outstanding ruthless creature. Ye Lan kept running and suddenly the monster grabbed him by the shirt, but he jumped back, turned around sharply and hit the monster with all his might, so that he flew back and fell unconscious. At that moment, evil spirits appeared, who possessed this terrible man, and he woke up with renewed vigor and roared loudly. He rushed at Lan again, and Lan thought that his strength was many times greater than the strength of other students. Ye Lan's spirit told him that people who possess spiritual power after becoming possessed can release it in much larger volumes. The spirit also added that an ordinary person can be possessed by only one spirit, and the aura of at least 30 beings emanates from this man. Then the guy asked how much time he had to deal with everything, taking into account the number of ghosts in the school, and if they would constantly stay. The spirit inside replied that he didn't have as much time as it might seem, because ghosts don't have the habit of taking care of their bodies, so the body won't be able to withstand 30 creatures for a long time. Disciple Yi was well aware that if this continued, then the body would no longer return to normal, and this person would most likely just die immediately afterwards. Then Ye Lan ran out onto the roof of the school and wrapped the artifact around his hands. The possessed man ran after him. The guy hit him in the chest, and then, after running around several times, just tied him up with this thing that was on his hands. The man was shouting loudly and making growling noises. Then the apprentice Lan tightened the knot tighter, and with the help of the exorcising demon seal of the sun hit the possessed man in the back, and he screamed. All the evil entities came out of the man's body. He fell, and the winner sighed with great relief and sat down on the floor. The evil spirits wanted to attack Ye Lan from behind, but he used his weapon again and created a sun shield around himself. Then all the monsters left. The spirit said that using the breath of light to prevent the ghosts from reaching him was a very good idea, but he reminded his master that if he spent such a large amount of spiritual energy every time, it would be much more difficult for him to cope with such enhanced ghosts, creatures. Ye Lan got to his feet, stretched, and said that if there were many similar people who could become a vessel for a large number of ghosts, Sun Mao would obviously send them all at once, and there shouldn't be many people here who have a lot of spiritual energy. The spirit said that these ghosts are dangerous only when they parasitize someone, and in this case only the disciple Mao himself remains. Then the spirit added that even though they face some difficulties, in general, everything is going according to plan. The spirit also said that Zhang Zihua could also be considered capable enough, since he was a Taoist magician. Ye Lan said that this could become a problem and rushed to escape from the roof. The guard rushed to run to the Taoist magician to attack him, but Zhang Zihua used the truth, the call of the mighty Meng. The one called by Zhang hit the old possessed guard and he flew back, but immediately landed on all fours and prepared to attack again. So he restrained him again when he wanted to attack Zai Hua. The Taoist understood perfectly well that it would not be possible to expel the spirit from a person's body with ordinary attacks, so he would have to use another technique. The mighty Meng grabbed the old guard by the arms and held him. Magician Zhang bit his finger on his hand until it bled and began to write spells on the leaves. Then Zai Hua directed the spell at the guard and the guard screamed, and then an evil spirit came out of his body. The guard fell and the spirit of Meng caught him in his arms and kept him from falling to the floor. At that moment, high school student Ye Lan ran into the room and shouted that magician Zhang Zihua should not let evil spirits get to him. A huge number of evil spirits headed straight for him and he was preparing to fight them back. Zhang created a light shield around himself and the spirits couldn't get to him. But then Zai Hua spread his arms, and the monsters possessed him. Lan said that professionals should also be careful, and Taoist Zai Hua rushed to attack him. At first, Ye Lan was running away, but then he suddenly stopped and hit the magician on the neck. But Zhang Zihua dodged and hit the opponent in the chest so that he flew off, hit the wall, broke it, and fell to the floor. Ye Lan immediately stood up and looked at Zhang, who was doing some incomprehensible spells. Then disciple Yi ran up, hit Zhang Zai Hua in the face and told the spirits inside that this was not at all like the methods of his new friend and partner. Zhang Zihua growled and was about to attack again. Lan thought that as expected from a professional, Zhang's skills greatly surpassed those of ordinary high school students. Zai Hua rushed at Ye Lan and they clung to each other tightly. The young guy wanted to throw the magician over his shoulder, but he hit Ye Lan in the shoulder and he flew away again. Disciple Yi rushed at his opponent again, but Zhang Zihua hit him again and Ye Lan flew back. When Lan was lying down, Zhang came up and wanted to finish him off, but he suddenly kicked Zhang with his foot and then immediately hit him in the stomach. The Taoist hit him back, so they continued to fight with each other. Zhang Zihua kicked Ye Lan so that he flew even further and lay against the wall. Magician Zhang came up and wanted to hit him again, but suddenly Sun Mao appeared, said that this was enough, and the Taoist magician immediately stopped. Mao said that high school student Yi doesn't have to go through such suffering at all. Sun Mao said that people like Ye Lan probably never had to experience severe pain, and no matter how you look at Lan, he is completely different from him. He is not the one who endured all the insults and bullying. Ye Lan said that such expressions did not touch him at all. Mao got very angry and said that of course it was true, because Ye Lan was only slightly injured. No one forced him to eat cigarette butts, no one pulled off his pants and forced him to crawl on all fours and apologize, recording it all on video. Offended and angry, Mao loudly shouted that he had been humiliated and slandered just like that. After that he never managed to make a single friend in this school. Then he asked how a person who had just had a couple of bones broken and who had never experienced his pain would be able to understand him. Sun Mao asked how Lan could not understand how perfect his plan was. Then Ye Lan said that the so-called ghost spirits are just creatures who want to get comfort for themselves from the pain of others, and people like Mao, who dig into their grief, only obediently follow the offenders. And then I want to vent my anger on people who are completely innocent of anything, just great company for these spirits. Disciple Yi looked Sun Mao's disciple in the eye and said that he should not pretend to be a great and powerful person. The possessed Mao was simply furious at such words. He asked how Ye Lan dared to say such a thing to him. He told his old friend to close his mouth and enjoy the pain, and then sent all the spirits straight to Ye Lan. At this time, the magician pasted a spell on Sun Mao's body while he was absorbed in his work. Ye Lan stood up and asked if Zhang Zihua had deliberately waited until the last moment to create some kind of dramatic moment, and added that he had never thought that he was a fan of this. Then Zhang replied that it was necessary to wait for the right moment. The magician Zai Hua said that he immediately guessed that the one who controls all the spirits from the shadows might want him in his collection. Zhang said that in fact, when he writes magic formulas on amulets, he uses the method of semi-penetration. This method involves superimposing two sheets of paper on top of each other and then drawing the characters with ink. The ink is absorbed and the second sheet has a similar transcript to the first, so you can achieve a double effect with much less effort. Taoist Zai Hua said that he deliberately pretended to be a spirit and fought with Ye Lan, and all this was in order to find out who controls the puppets. Zai Hua said that he thought that the one who controls the puppets could use him as a vessel when his spiritual energy runs out. But Zhang Zai Hua really did not expect that there would be so many spirits, and in fact he even lost consciousness at first, and when he just started to tell with Ye Lan he was completely under the influence of the spirits. Only in the process he managed to recover after the student Yi hit him. Zai Hua thought that the mixed martial arts he was engaged in were second only to the basic skills of the highest category in physical strength, under the condition of normal cultivation of spiritual energy, in many ways surpassed the strength of ordinary people, and Ye Lan, the most ordinary high school student, was able to endure his attack as if nothing had happened. Magician Zhang thought about the one where this strange high school student could train. Ye Lan looked at his partner and said that he knew from the very beginning that he was just pretending to be possessed, so in order to play along with him, he only fought with half his strength. Zhang Zihua laughed and thought that Ye Lan was a great guy. Then Zhang decided to say that he realized that Lan realized that he was pretending to be possessed, so he decided to play along with him and used only 30% of his strength. Magician Zhang asked if he had accidentally injured his friend during their fight. Then Ye Lan said that he used 20% of his strength to play along, and Zhang Zihua said that he used 10% of his strength. Ye Lan then said that he had actually just found an amulet that could limit his strength, otherwise he would have smashed everything to pieces here long ago. The magician asked if it was a dragon pearl. Then the Taoist Zai Hua suddenly grabbed his head with his hands, walked up to the table and leaned on it. Student Yi asked if he was alright and said he didn't really want to explain to his colleagues what had happened to him here. Magician Zhang replied that he just had a headache from realizing how many reports he would have to write now. Ye Lan said that in that case everything was fine and he would just leave the rest to a professional and fell to the floor, losing consciousness. Suddenly, Zai Hua turned around and saw that all the spells had fallen from Sun Mao's back. Magician Zhang was well aware that things were bad and tried to create new ones, but Mao hit him and he fell. Sun Mao said that he thought that the Taoist magician had some trump card up his sleeve, but his techniques are much worse than those used by his predecessors. He called the magician Zhang Dao's an amateur. Mao's disciple with a sinister expression on his face walked towards Zhang Zai Hua. Zhang asked him who he was anyway. Sun Mao said that he always knew perfectly well that this humanity was doomed, but that a descendant of Taoist magicians would not recognize his uncle. This is too much. Mao shouted that Zhang Zihua should die here and rushed at him. Sun Mao said that many are ready to do all the dirty work for the tiger, but few people really realize that tigers are mostly completely brainless and spirits allow him to eat as much as he wants until he takes place and costs his teeth. Then the ghosts will devour both his body and soul. Disciple Mao went on to say that after eating one tiger, the spirits begin to look for a new one as a host, so at the end of the cycle, everything human in the spirits completely disappears, and at the very end only the strongest spirit remains. Mao released his long claws and swung at the magician, who was still lying on the floor, and then said that hundreds of years had passed since the Zhang era, and the master woke up just now. The monks did not even know how strong Mana had become during this time. But who would have thought that even those who he is able to study Taoist methods, you will not find it in the daytime with fire. The spirit in the disciple Sun Mao said that then he could only hide and be content with rare meals, but now everything is different. Now he can savor the energy of hundreds of students of this school, and this is a real paradise for him. The Taoist asked if the owner the monster found was Mao or not. The demon looked at him and asked if his friend Ye Lan was suitable for this. Sun Mao said that Lan's spiritual energy fully corresponds to the energy of an adult. He decided to use it in order to better learn the values and customs of this era, as well as to collect all the information about the students of this school. He said he was just copying patterns of behavior, getting closer to the students so that it would be much easier to drain their souls later. Then the monster rushed to Ye Lan. He took him by the head, lifted him up and said that he originally wanted to use this more capable body as a vessel, and who would have thought that such a great opportunity would present itself. The monster in the disciple Sun Mao said that compared to the spirit of a man, with the spirit of a tiger, Ye Lan can bring much more benefit. He said he had felt it for a long time and smiled ominously. Then Mao added that disciple Yi also has his demon at the tiger. Sun Mao said that he just needed to absorb the spirit that sits in Ye Lan's body, and then, in this era of insignificant Taoist magicians, continue to absorb people who have concentrated spiritual energy. Mao said that he would definitely succeed in this, and at that moment Ye Lan laughed. Ye Lan opened his eyes and apologized with a laugh, and then said that he did not want to laugh at all, but could not restrain himself anymore. Ye Lan said that this is practically like in a mobile game. In order to increase the limit of allowed cards, first you need to spend all the available ones. In the first stages 2 tigers are required, and then twice as much, and only this way you can fool the system. Mao asked if it seemed funny. There were many evil spirits flying around them. Zhang Zihua thought that 3 years later, after the restoration of spiritual principles, the vast majority of emergencies registered by the Specialized Executive Office have a classification of yellow and lower. The Taoist knew that there had definitely been no mention of a monster of this rank before. He was very afraid that only a master could cope with such a monster, which absorbed so many disciples. Ye Lan told Sun Mao that he was wrong, as the spirits considered him to be exactly the same as them. The spirit in Lan's body said that Sun Mao was actually really very unlucky. He ran into a meeting with him. Lan's face lit up red and disciple Mao did not understand what was going on at all, because he had just felt real pain. He pinned high school student Yi against the wall, and started lifting chairs, aiming at him to hit. The evil spirit in Sun Mao's body had not felt pain at all since he became a tiger spirit. He remembered perfectly well that the last time he felt pain was when he was still a man and he was killed by a huge tiger. But several hundred years had passed since then. Up to this point, even if the spirit of Mao was attacked by a Taoist magician, he felt it like the bite of an ordinary mosquito. However, this time everything was completely different. The monster felt the most real and all-encompassing pain. Sun Mao threw the chairs at Ye Lan, but they scattered in different directions. A bright light appeared. The spirit of Mao looked at it with surprise and incomprehension. He clenched his teeth and looked towards Lan. Disciple Yi jumped out of the pile of flying chairs and rushed to the spirit in Sun Mao. Ye Lan hit his opponent hard and Mao flew off, hitting the wall hard. Jiang Zihua was still lying on the floor at this moment and looking at the scene happening nearby. He realized that all this time there was also a spirit in the body of disciple Yi, the spirit of a mythical demon. Ye Lan turned into a demon and the same mask appeared on his face. He looked at the spirit in Sun Mao and asked if throwing stools was his trick from the very beginning. Mao asked with anger in his eyes, "Is Ye Lan also a demon?" The spirit in Sun Mao looked at Lan and saw that only part of his body was shrouded in an aura. However, it looked quite intimidating. Sun Mao thought that those strips of cloth that disciple Yi used seemed to have already worn out. Then the evil spirit Mao said that it didn't matter at all what kind of creature Ye Lan was, since in any case he was going to become dinner now. The spirit in Sun Mao said that he had already absorbed the spiritual energy of hundreds of people of this school, so he simply cannot lose to high school student Yi. They charged at each other. The spirit in Sun Mao wanted to punch Ye Lan in the face, but the red spirit stopped his hand with one of his own. The spirit of Lan said that the evil Mao is just a clown jumping back and forth, who simply does not dare to compare himself with him. Ye Lan hit his enemy again and Sun Mao hit the wall so hard that it even cracked. Jiang Zihua thought at this moment that it looked like when Lan said that he used only 30% of his strength. He wasn't lying at all. Zihua recalled how disciple Yi said that since his plan had failed, he would have to follow plan B at that moment. Magician Zhang thought that Ye Lan blurted it out for nothing. But now Zihua wondered if it was possible that if he had not attracted the attention of this spirit, Lan would have dealt with him long ago. Senior Yi stood and looked at his enemy, who was about to attack him again. The spirit in Sun Mao was very angry and there was a lot of negative energy hovering around him. The evil Mao turned into a huge monster and rushed straight at Ye Lan. Jiang Zihua shouted to his friend to be careful, because Sun Mao sacrifices his speed in order to increase his strength. The Do prepared to defend himself and waited for the evil spirit to attack him. The spirit in Sun Mao attacked, but disciple Yi managed to react and hit his enemy first. Then he grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt and the monster screamed. The Do started attacking the monster and the monster started screaming that it was in a lot of pain and fell to the floor. Then the monster stood up again and looked at his opponent. Ye Lan also looked at the monster and clenched his hands into fists. Ye Lan went to the monster who was looking at him attentively at that time. Sun Mao was scratching with his long and sharp claws and was about to attack his opponent again. But the Do was ahead of him, ran up and was about to strike. The monster created some kind of portal around itself, and when disciple Yi wanted to attack it, they both moved out of the assembly hall. Jiang Zihua remained in the assembly hall all alone and began to look around carefully. At that moment, Ye Lan appeared right in front of his face. Magician Jiang was a little wary. Then Taoist Zihua coughed, covering his mouth with his hand and said that it was apparently something similar to that barrier on the street. The man explained that the spirits use the tactics of the devil drives in circles to confuse their victim and drive her into a corner, and the strongest spirit is probably the most knowledgeable in this. Jiang Zihua said that the spirit in Sun Mao probably only pretended that he was going to fight with a classmate. But in fact all this was just a way to distract them so that they could escape later. Ye Lan walked up to the magic barrier and stuck one hand into it, and Zihua said that it was quite difficult to dispel this magic circle in a confined space. Then Magician Jiang added that his colleague should be here soon, but they cannot know for sure if there are any more traps here, so they should not act at random. Ye Lan brought his hand back, moved away from the magic barrier and said that there was clearly some kind of pattern in this. Taoist Zihua came up to him and said that of course the magic barrier has some kind of core, but looking for it is just as stupid as trying to guess a 5-character password blindly, unless one of them owns some suitable technique. Jiang then said that even to back up a 5-digit cipher, about 100,000 different combinations would need to be checked, and it was impossible to do it exactly one by one. Zihua said that of course he is not a supporter of such methods, but he will have to do it, since they both really want to get out of here. Then a professional should do it, and Ye Lan should just stand and watch, and Jiang Zihua began to draw his spells again. Senior Yi at this time stood with his hands in his pockets and carefully watched the actions of the magician Zihua. Jiang Zihua started to calculate something and write on the sheets, and his partner asked about what thousands of combinations. Then Ye Lan said that he had thought and he wouldn't have to try his luck 100,000 times. Jiang asked what the student was talking about at all, because he just gave the easiest example to understand. Then he asked what Lan was going to do, and Ye Lan had already started doing something at that time. Disciple Yi ran right at the barrier. He said it was worth trying in different directions. The student ran around the assembly hall again and tried to do something. He even flew on top. Jiang Zihua stood and looked at his new friend in a state of shock. Zihua thought he wanted to ask if Ye Lan was an idiot by accident, But at this rate, Magician Zhang thought that Ye Lan would really be able to remove the barrier. The schoolboy still continued to run around the hall with incredible speed, then he ran to the door and opened it. Then Zai Hua said that the strategy of selecting different combinations really worked. The monster, who was a student of Sun Mao's school at that time, was wandering around the street outside the school all wounded and angry because of the pain he felt. He looked at his hands and thought that Ye Lan was just a disgusting boy. He had injured him so badly. It seemed to him that a little more and he might well already be dead. A bird was watching the monster in Sun Mao. She suddenly screamed loudly that she had already told the creature that possessed Sun Mao that he just needed to gather enough spiritual energy in this school, and then immediately leave here. The monster thought that he was not going to do anything like that at all, but the inexplicable obsession of this disciple Sun Mao took over. He thought that he should not have shown such lust towards the creature that sits in Ye Lan. However, the deed was already done and it was not done by him, so the monster was very angry. Then Mao told the winged beast that actually all these practices are much more capable than he described them to him, especially the one that handles fire. The animal only tilted its head to the side and said that this was a real shame, and then added that the monster himself should know what would happen to him if it somehow affected the plans of the master. Then the tiger said that Ye Lan and Zhang Zihua were trapped in his trap today, so he would quickly finish something and would already leave. The blackbird flew away, and the monster stayed at the school. He looked at the bird with displeasure and said that this creature was just very stupid since it was trying to intimidate others with someone else's authority. There were a lot of people lying near the school. The demon approached one of the students and looked at him. Mao wanted to suck the spiritual energy out of the guy, but at that moment Ye Lan was already coming down the stairs in a monster mask. The young guy looked at the monster in the body of his old Durga Sun Mao and waved his right hand at him. Ye Lan walked down the steps and approached his enemy. He said that he had already thought that he had escaped, and that would be very problematic for them. The disciples of Ye stood in front of the monster and added that apparently he was waiting for him here, so he did not go anywhere. The opponent asked how the guy managed to get out of his magic field, because he had installed 3,000 barriers. Even no expert in various formations could physically check all the options in such a short time. Then Lan thought that he was a very unlucky person. Once out of 3,000 he made as many as 2,800 different attempts. But the guy did not show his surprise. He looked at his opponent and asked how some insignificant field of barriers could stop him and force him to surrender without resistance. Then the red monster told his master that now he feels exactly the same breath of death here as 3 years ago, although at the moment his concentration is negligible. Ye Lan decided that this was not surprising at all. It seemed very strange to him from the very beginning. Because even if the strongest spirit is able to control the rest of the spirits, but even he cannot gather such a large number of them in one place. He definitely had to have an assistant, but no one imagined that he could turn out to be such a large fish. Meanwhile, Song Mao begged to run away while he was still intact, but of course the high school student noticed this and immediately stopped the monster. He fell, growled and began to scream loudly. Then Ye Lan stepped on his head with his foot and his spirit asked what Mao knew about the spirit of mountains and forests, trees and rocks, Fan Liang. At this time, somewhere far away in the city, a man named Qiongqi was standing on the roof. This man held a large compass in his hands and watched the bright green glow in the night sky. The girl who found Fail at the hotel came up to him from behind and told the man not to move and listen carefully to what she was going to tell him. She said that the man on the roof is charged with a crime related to the illegal use of special abilities, as well as a crime related to obstructing public servants in the use of their official duties. The girl introduced herself, said her name was Lai Sinan. She was from the Emergency Investigation Department and the man was arrested. Sinan added that Qiongqi should know for himself that when she gets down to business, it's better not to throw out any tricks. Jia chuckled and asked, "Doesn't this all seem funny to the girl?" She replied that he had single-handedly established Feng Shui, which attracted thousands of previously sleeping spirits to Cheng's city's number 3 high school, which caused many innocent children to suffer. In addition, Sinan's colleague, Zhang Zihua, was also injured. She asked if Qiongqi really thinks he is innocent. The man standing on the edge said that the revival of spiritual forces will bring much more changes to this world than the Industrial Revolution, and the special unit only does what it constantly looks back and tries to keep the already established order of things and so should not continue. The man added that this approach has lost its relevance for a very long time and the girl herself should see perfectly well that Qiongqi has quite enough strength to master Feng Shui of this scale. He said that blaming him for some 100 victims is like not distinguishing the main from the secondary. He certainly didn't care about the lives of all these schoolchildren at all, and Jia asked, even if he really killed them all, what they could do to him. The man with the compass turned around and looked back at the girl with red hair. And then he said that he had been studying Feng Shui secret techniques all his life, before people perceived these techniques as some kind of fraud that does not have any practical use. And now that there is an opportunity to catch such a big surge of powerful aura, he is not going to go around and justify himself to everyone. Simply put, the man said that people with special abilities still cling to the old, familiar way of life, which no longer has absolutely no value and has no future. Qiongqi believed that he was the one who could change all this. Then Jia magically pulled the suitcase that Lai Sinan was carrying with her to him and pushed the suitcase hard into her. But, since Sinan was quite experienced, she managed to dodge the blow with a huge thing in time. At that moment, Fu Zhu appeared on the roof. The young guy told her that Mr. Zun's technique is very valuable to them all, so no one dares to treat her like that. Then the guy introduced himself, and the girl with red hair thought that for some reason she didn't even feel his presence next to them. Sinan intercepted her suitcase with her belongings and put it next to her again. Then Fu Zhu said that what he had planned was quite difficult to implement and it was high time for them to go. The guy put 2 fingers in his mouth, whistled, and a big black bird with red eyes appeared in the gloomy sky. This black monster flew to the call of his master and landed on the roof near him. Qiongqi immediately grabbed onto the powerful paws of the feathered one, and Fu Zhu said goodbye to Sinan that although the spirits did not command the bodies of high school students from school number 3 for very long, they still probably brought many other dangerous creatures to this place. He said that if the girl really cares about the fate of all these people, she clearly shouldn't waste her time here. Then the guy said goodbye to Miss Lin and flew away on his bird. Ye Lan, meanwhile, was still at his school and was handling the monster in the body of his friend and classmate. The disciple tortured the demon, but he continued to claim that he knew absolutely nothing and was telling the truth, because he was a simple pawn and he certainly could not know anything about such an important being as the spirit of Fan Lan. Sun Mao assured the red demon that he had said absolutely everything he knew. Then Senior Yi decided that he was being told the truth, and then suddenly remembered about his partner and decided that since Zhang Zihua looked pretty confident, nothing terrible would happen if he fiddled with the magic barrier a little more. Sun Mao looked up at his enemy and asked if he would let him go, and Lan remembered saying that. But now everything was darkly different. Ye Lan thought about it, then lowered himself closer to Mao and said that he thought that if the demon told him the truth, then other creatures would surely not leave the one who leaked all the information about Fan Lan. And if everything said was a lie, then there is no reason to let the monster go. Therefore, the red demon decided that it would be better for the creature and Sun Mao to just die and began to absorb him. So Ye Lan finally freed his old friend who was bullied at school from obsession. The guy saw a man in a red mask in front of him and was very scared, so he almost immediately moved away from him. But then he recognized his friend in him and began to stutter a little. Then tears began to flow from the student's eyes. He said that from the very beginning he felt that it was Ye Lan. But this thing that hides inside causes him horror and he thinks that he probably sat something wrong. A classmate told Lan that he would probably have to kill him to get rid of the monster inside. Then a bright red flame appeared when Sun Mao looked at the student opposite him. Lai Sinan walked up to the building of school number 3 in Cheng's city, where Zhang Zihua and Ye Lan were currently staying. She carefully examined the area, felt a powerful barrier with the help of her powers, and thought that this school had simply turned into something like a haunted house in such a short time. So it's hard to say whether their specialized unit will cope with this problem. Everything looked much worse than the girl had originally imagined. Then Sinan saw a schoolboy lying on the ground. It was Sun Mao. She noticed that his spiritual energy could not be described as ordinary. While the girl was examining the student, a surprised Zhang Zihua ran out of the doors of the educational institution and shouted that he heard just terrifying screams. When the Taoist saw his boss, he was excited and greeted her. But Lai Sinan said that from such greetings she condemns herself as an old 40-year-old woman and she really does not like it. The guy approached the girl and also sat down next to the student. When Zihua was asked what happened here, he replied that Mao was possessed by a very strong evil spirit, but all this can wait for now. Magician Zhang realized that he no longer felt negative energy from Sun Mao, but his friend had strangely disappeared somewhere, which caused difficult emotions because the spirit could take over Ye Lan's body and just run away for a long time. The Taoist magician walked around the school grounds and carefully looked at all the students and suddenly noticed among them his friend whom he was looking for. He was lying on the ground in an unconscious state. Zhang Zihua immediately approached him and wanted to ask if he was alright. Ye Lan just opened his eyes and looked at his friend. A girl with red hair saw these two and asked what was wrong with the young man. Her colleague understood perfectly well that disciple Ye was the owner of the demon's appearance, but he did not know whether to tell the boss about it, because then Lan would no longer be able to live as he had lived before. But hiding the truth clearly contradicts the protocol of a specialized unit, and if this student suddenly creates any problems in the future, it will clearly be related to today's incident. Taoist Jiang did not know what he should do in this situation, because the guy saved his life quite recently, and judging by his behavior, he tried his best to avoid meeting with other employees of the unit. Among other things, Jiang Zihua felt that the incident was partly his fault, because he suddenly showed up here. Lai Sinan asked if everything was okay with her colleague. The Taoist replied that everything was fine and smiled awkwardly, adding that he saw the guy next to him fall out of the school window and, fortunately, everything went without any serious injuries. In fact, Ye Lan had already regained consciousness. He looked at his new acquaintance with a satisfied smile, with whom he had already gone through a lot. When morning came, help and an ambulance finally arrived at the school. School children were taken to the hospital for further examination. Sinan told someone on the phone that the surveillance of the school was more complicated by the installation of a magic barrier. A natural gas leak was detected on its territory and all students were taken to the hospital for further observation. She also added that soon, when everything is sorted out, they will publish the news that there is no more leakage and thereby emphasize that they are extremely concerned about this situation. In fact, the girl was thinking that the administration is far from omnipotent, and there will probably be a lot of rumors about such a case. Even thinking about it made her feel uncomfortable. But she continued to say that in any case, as long as parents can contact their children, everything will be fine, although only some of them are in good health and should wake up very soon. Suddenly, Sinan said that she had something else she wanted to tell the director. The girl said that there is one person whose name is Fuzhu, and he seems to be very well aware of her abilities, but there are practically no people who know about it even in a specialized unit. At least I don't include Zun Jiada. Lai Sinan was clearly very concerned about this. The president of the National Emergency Management, Jai Hao Kang, an elderly man, said that he understood everything perfectly and hung up the phone. Jiang Zihua stood at the gate of the school with student Yi and told him that at that time he would just let him leave quietly, and then they would be even. Ye Lan immediately turned around and left, saying that it was good, and fortunately, he did not get to know their organization better. Then Jiang suddenly said that that thing, the red mask, is the thing of one spirit caster. The guy scratched his neck, stopped and said that he did not quite understand his friend. Was he really saying something in a professional language? Then Lan heard that the legend says that once upon a time a man, who was called a spirit caster, created 12 masks, in each of which an extremely dangerous spirit is imprisoned. The Taoist said that he was lucky to accidentally meet one of the owners of such a mask and asked if the disciple could tell which of the 12 masks he had. Ye Lan said that he could only assume that it was Bo Kai. Zihua tried to stop the new acquaintance, but he said that there were not enough people here to keep him. Then Mag Zhang thought about it and decided that apparently this young guy does not want to harm anyone at all, although he is still a bully. He said that he had something completely different in mind, because it can be a little dangerous to let a schoolboy go alone on all 4 sides just like that. Therefore, the Taoist suggested that Lan exchange contact details. After a hard day, Ye Lan was finally at home. He put the kettle on and went to change into other clothes. The red spirit asked why Bo Kai, and the owner told him that his reputation was clearly better, and in any case, no one had seen their true guises, so it didn't matter at all. The student threw the t-shirt into the laundry and brewed noodles for himself. The spirit suddenly asked if Lan was afraid that he would devour Sun Mao's soul when he let him eat the evil spirit. The guy sat down on a chair and said that his schoolmate naively believed that bullies bully others because they themselves do not know what pain and humiliation are. Probably it's not bad. He said that the more the spirit understands how oppressed the victim is, the happier and stronger he eventually becomes. Just like then, the man with the golden ring. Finally, the noodles were ready and the landlord began to eat. He added that in fact, the spirit was deliberately trying to provoke Mao, but his soul should taste rather bland. After Ye Lan had eaten a delicious meal, he finally lay down in his soft bed and breathed a sigh of relief. The guy fell asleep almost immediately. In a dream he was in another place. He was in some kind of desert. There were golden chains and bright light. The revered Qiongqi was chained to the chains. The spirit of the mask said that they had been playing tag for 3 years, and now, having caught a weak tiger, he decided to impose a couple of restrictions. He added that he has a feeling that the boy has not made any progress at all. The deer dodged the tiger's blows and said that they should end it as soon as possible, because he already wants to sleep, and they say if a person does not sleep well, he will not grow up. Ye Lan decided that the faster the better and rushed to his opponent, and the tiger also rushed at him. Ye Lan grabbed onto the golden chains and ran towards his enemy. He was born on a ferocious huge tiger. He tried to escape with a stone, but the cobblestone was split into pieces. A lot of stones of different sizes were flying at the guy, but he didn't seem to pay attention to them. He was completely focused on his goal. Disciple Yi appeared again to attack the beast. Meanwhile, news channels reported that a natural gas leak occurred last night at the No. 3 high school in Qiongqi. Fortunately, everything ended well and all the students were taken to the hospital for examination. And Tianshan and Yuguang streets were blocked for a while. All this was listened to by a courier who was unloading his car with delivery. He heard that according to the results of the examination, the probability of a natural gas leak is very small. But such attention to the situation shows a responsible attitude to ensuring the safety of school students. It was also said that after all the threats were soon settled, the students would be able to return to their homes and classes. The courier was very surprised when he listened to all this news. He finally found the right package and went to the customer's door. After ringing the bell, the courier reported that it was a delivery, but they did not answer him for a long time, and therefore he even began to doubt the correctness of the parcel address. The door was opened to him by Ye Lan, who apologized for not answering immediately, explaining that he was a little busy with other things. The delivery guy said it wasn't scary at all. At 6:28, a guy named Zhang Yang woke up in his apartment. He woke up even before the alarm clock rang. At 6:35, the guy went to the bathroom to wash up and he still had an inexplicable strange feeling. In the morning at 7:48, Zhang Lu was at work and sitting at the computer. He was absolutely indifferent to all these things. He had not watched TV shows for a very long time, and the vast majority of the names that his colleagues called him were completely unfamiliar to him. The guy believed that instead of following trends and being in the topic, it's better to get more sleep, because communication with colleagues still does not contribute to more productive work. At noon at 12:37, the guy was eating in the dining room, and although the dishes there were always different, they all tasted exactly the same. He thought that ordering food would be a pretty good solution, but it's getting more and more expensive. The skull at 1919, when the working day was already over, the young man looked impatiently at his watch, sitting at an unexpected meeting, to which everyone was gathered by the head. Then at 19:30 after the meeting, the new manager offered everyone to eat together and absolutely no one cared about the guy who had plans to leave. Finally, at 19:56 in the evening, he was already at the computer and sighed with relief. There was a young and beautiful girl on the screen who greeted all the guests on her stream. The girl said that Zhang Liu came earlier today and asked if he wanted to sing a song. The guy wrote that he apologized for such a rush and transferred the donat 500. A confirmation of the transfer amount appeared on the screen and Zhang confirmed it. The streamer sincerely thanked the user Milk Ice Cream is the most delicious for donating and smiled sweetly at the camera. The girl began to say that he was back to the old and from now on she would be silent until 8 o'clock. Zhang wrote that the girl was being too insincere. At night at 23:12, the guy was still watching. The streamer said that she had completely forgotten about the special offer for VIP users. Since today is the anniversary of their platform, they decided to choose 3 winners who will receive an exclusive video. Then Milk Ice Cream is the most delicious wanted to send another donation of 500. But he did not have enough funds. Zhang looked at the phone with horror. He was very unhappy that he did not have enough money, and the salary would be only next week. The girl said that the winners will be announced soon. Finally, they were announced and the 3 lucky ones were the users 90. Milk Ice Cream is the most delicious and 90. No one doubted that Mr. Milkman would pull out a lucky ticket. Zhang Lai was very surprised and didn't even know how it happened. The guy started filling out a column with personal information, entered the nickname Malichnik, name Zhang Yang. Just a couple of seconds later, he received an application for friends and the same cherished video file in compressed format. The guy doubted for a moment whether it was a virus by chance, but after a little thought, he decided that his computer was already old anyway and barely breathing, so there was nothing to lose anyway. When Zhang Yang opened the file, he saw an empty chair, and there was no one nearby at all. Suddenly, a streamer appeared in front of him and greeted him by name. Zhang even blushed a little from such surprise and embarrassment. The streamer said that she had been fascinated by him for a long time, so she was glad when he was lucky in this lottery. Maybe it was fate itself. The girl said that in honor of the anniversary, she wants to give him a gift and hopes that from now on, He will always be happy. Suddenly, the laptop lit up with a bright light right into the guy's eyes. Then Jang Young woke up. It was 6:28 in the morning. At 7:48 everything was as usual. The guy was at work and heard all the gossip of his colleagues. At 12:37, Jang was eating that tasteless lunch again in the dining room. Then in the evening, at 19:04, there was a meeting at work. After all this hard day, the guy finally went home. He left the company building and ran home. At that moment, something very unexpected happened. Jang Young was hit by a huge car. His shoe flew off his foot and flew to the other side. His face and body were covered in blood. People started running to the young man to help. They were just terrified, because there was blood everywhere. The guy was called an ambulance. He was lying on the cold asphalt with his eyes open, but already lifeless, from which blood was flowing. The presenter happily greeted all the people at the Baka Baka World event, and asked them to take precautions and follow their turn so that everything went well. Although it was raining quite heavily outside, there were a lot of people. Among them was Jang Zai-hua, who was looking at his phone and thinking about whether it could be called irresponsible that people still think about the festival at such a time. Jang walked away and sat down against a wall, sighing heavily. He decided that he should discuss everything that was happening with the master and asked him by SMS whether it was really permissible not to mention anything about Ye Lan. Because although at first glance it seemed that he did not pose a threat, everything could be completely different. The teacher replied that Zai-hua had probably already made his choice. Besides, in addition to such trivial things, there are much more serious matters. Then the Taoist was somewhat confused, because before the master himself had told him about taking all things seriously. Then the teacher asked Jang to go to the anime festival instead of him and buy him a couple of things from the list, since he himself is now in Egypt and will not be able to attend. Magician Jang made a grimace of displeasure, as he decided that all this was a lie, and this man was just shirking serious business, and besides all this, he was also distracting others. Jang Zai-hua was walking with a paper leaf pointer in his hands and was looking for a figure 3344 from a limited collection. But when he finally came to the right place, he was very disappointed to see a long queue. The queue was so long that even 30 minutes later, the young magician was still standing in the waiting area. And even after 1 hour, he was still standing in line. But then finally it was the Taoist's turn and he approached a young girl who was handing out figurines. She told the guy that she was very sorry, but he would be able to get a figure from a limited collection only if he had all the marks on the passage of exclusive events. Magician Jang couldn't even think about it. He was so disappointed that he even offered to pay twice as much, despite the dissatisfaction of the people behind. Suddenly, someone from the crowd began to be indignant that Jang Zai-hua was trying to bribe and using disgusting tricks, because 3344 was so very small, and he was also trying to get her in such a dirty way. Everyone thought it was just disgusting. Then one young guy asked what Su-hua was wearing for a suit that didn't even correspond to this place at all. And no matter how the young magician tried to calm the crowd, they all kept saying the same thing, that he was not welcome here. Suddenly, some noise and shouts were heard behind. It turned out that some man with glasses was trying to pass without waiting in line. People shouted at him to get in line, that he was behaving disgusting and stinking, but the man did not pay attention to them. He was walking forward to his goal. The girl suddenly said that if Jang still wants to purchase 3344, he can do it retroactively. But when she finished speaking, young Jang had already disappeared. Zai-hua stood at the back of the queue and watched the man with glasses, as he considered him very suspicious. He was standing behind the stage and when he clapped his hands, a sign appeared with a special guest of today's festival, Wrong Zai. Some have been following her since then, when she had very few subscribers. People in the crowd were delighted and crying, regretting that it was not 3 days. It all seemed quite ordinary. But Magician Jang saw perfectly with his own eyes that it all started when that suspicious person clapped his hands. Even more suspicious was the fact that he didn't even turn around and look. Then Jang Zai-hua decided that he should distract others and get down to business. The magician followed the man, but he noticed him. The Taoist knew that it was impossible to act when there were so many people around. Jang followed this man to the toilet. He even began to think that he just urgently wanted to go to the toilet. But the feeling of uncertainty still did not leave the magician. He believed that even the most suspicious person does not behave in this way. When the man stepped, Jang Zai-hua immediately felt a strange energy. It was the breath of death. You won't find death energy so concentrated even in the morgue, but it was here, in such a crowd of people, which was quite unusual. Taoist Zai-hua did not understand how such energy appeared among the crowd of young people. The magician went forward to the men's room and saw a wooden bird suspended on a rope, the paint on which had not dried yet. He realized this when he took the toy in his hand. Suddenly, some noise was heard and Zhang Zihua began to check all the booths. In one of them he found his missing person. Then the magician Zhang stabbed the man in the back, saying the words about the triple spiritual principle and the 7 unclean spirits. Nothing happened. Zihua was even a little scared because the man with glasses was still standing motionless and didn't even say anything. But suddenly he fell and Zhang thought it was kind of strange. He looked carefully at the ceiling and his expression changed from soft to more rude and serious. Zhang Zihua was looking at the ceiling and suddenly one of the doors behind him opened. Zihua slowly looked back, then abruptly turned around and immediately used the spell-using magic inscription. But what he saw surprised him very much. In front of the young magician stood his recent acquaintance, a high school student, Ye Lan. The guy threw an angry look and told Zhang not to scream, otherwise he could go deaf. The Taoist was still in shock and did not understand why this disciple was here. Then magician Zhang pointed his finger at Lan, who said that he did not expect to see him here again at all and thought it might be someone else. Zhang Zihua stopped the guy and said that this was not what they should discuss now and quickly asked what was going on here at all. Then Zihua heard a story about how disciple Yu was walking around the exhibition and accidentally noticed a man with a lost soul, thought that letting him just walk around among a lot of people might not be completely safe. That's why Ye Lan locked the guy up and wanted to deal with him when it was over. There wasn't much time left until the end of the exhibition, so Lan just locked the guy in the toilet and went to the store. The young magician was clearly dissatisfied with this behavior of the student and asked how he could even close a person against his will like that. He looked attentively at the high school student, who said that he had done everything he could as a pious passerby, and then asked if he was being listened to at all. Ye Lan said that since after a short walk he met another person with a lost soul, so he just couldn't help but take him with him. Then the student added that after all this he had a severe stomach ache, which was most likely due to the fact that he ate spicy noodles for breakfast. The Taoist magician asked to omit the rest of the details of the story. Then the deer said that he was very worried that the man could escape while he was gone, so he hung a wooden bird here. Zhang Zihua thought it was probably a no technique. The high school student was surprised that the guy in the suit even knows about this technique and said that he is really a professional in his field. Ye Lan said that a carved wooden bird, a so-called magic weapon, a lost soul in some sense is no different from a dead person, so this bird would not let him go. In addition, the student also put up signs that the floor is slippery here so that other people do not come. While Lan was busy with a personal matter, several more showers came to the toilet. A man in a suit came up to one of the booths and explained that the toilet is a place where yin energy reigns, and Lan also used an object that was too old, plus, because of the Nuo technique, yin energy only increased even more. In the eyes of the lost souls, this is very good, this is calming, so that when they feel the yin energy, they all immediately go to it. Zhang Zihua inspected the booths and many of them had souls. Ye Lan said that since his partner is already here, he can sort out all these problems himself. Only he asked to do it quickly, as he did not really want to be in this place for a long time. The guy came up and washed his hands, and the magician told him that they had one small problem. He asked why there were so many lost souls at this festival, and why the deer was here at all. The Taoist took out his piece of paper with ink and a spell. He said that until today he had met only one person with a condition similar to a lost soul. Zhang Zihua asked if the schoolboy had ever heard of a man named Yaji. At that moment, his red demon awakened in the schoolboy, and he felt another soul from behind. The guy managed to stop her with his hand and asked if the man in the suit didn't think that compared to Yaji, these bodies were all too harmless. Ye Lan added that if it had been him, things could have been much worse. Zhang Zihua abruptly turned around and threw the spell sheets at all the lost souls. People fell to the floor and lost consciousness. Then Magjiang said that since Ye Lan had so much extra time for idle chatter, then he could just help him drag all these people to another place. Zihua sighed heavily and closed his eyes. But Lan did not say anything, but only looked at the young magician. Zhang Zihua and Ye Lan started taking people out. The man in the suit was thinking that the student probably still knows something about Yaji. He remembered this guy with whom his investigation was connected. The physical condition of that person was very different from others, because his soul was practically torn apart. These same souls still have some remnants in their bodies, and they can even talk to people normally and eat food. And although, perhaps, all this had absolutely nothing to do with Lan, the Taoist magician still did not trust this schoolboy. It seemed to him that what the child said earlier might have something to do with Yaji, and he, as a person from the executive office, so frivolously agreed with everything. But what if all this was just a provocation? Zai Hua didn't know yet if he was going to continue the Yazzie case, but there was something suspicious about Lan's attitude towards it. It would be too suspicious if a person like high school student Yi was really here because of the most ordinary noodles. While Zhang Zaihu was thinking about all this, a schoolboy approached him from behind and asked if the magician knew where the souls of all these people had gone. Ye Lan pointed at the people standing by the wall with spell sheets pasted on their foreheads. The Taoist approached the guys, looked them over carefully and said that they were very fast. At this time, Ye Lan wanted to escape and threw a backpack over his shoulders and said he was leaving. Zhang immediately stopped him by turning to him and grabbing his hand. The young guy turned around, looked at the one who grabbed him and said with displeasure in his face that the magician himself said that this case had nothing to do with him, and then asked what he wanted from him. Taoist Zhang replied that everything is completely different now, because even if the student has absolutely nothing to do with this case, he will still need to be arrested for 15 days in accordance with the rules of a specialized unit. The student ruffled his hair on his head in frustration and said that in this case he would have to walk with Zhang Zai-hua. The guy in the suit added that if he resisted arrest, he could get a search warrant from the special department. Then he offered Ye Lan a more peaceful option, so that the student would help him in the investigation of the case as an assistant investigator. And if everything goes well enough, the magician promised to pretend that he knows absolutely nothing about what happened today. Now the choice was for high school student Yi. After a little reflection on this question, the student said that before the magician Zhang said that he was a professional. He was curious why Zai Hua's ability is so weak, because it seems like there is a specialization in the art industry and Zhang just refers to it. The Taoist magician smiled and decided that at last this annoying child could be at least useful in something. He thought that asking Lan for help in investigating this case was definitely a pretty good idea. The consequences of the school situation still hadn't disappeared, and this worried the young magician. In addition, 3 employees of their unit were injured or missing. The first was Shen Feilai, a second-level employee of the Special Affairs Department. She was attacked and is currently unconscious in a medical facility. The second person is Qiongqi, a first-class employee of the Special Management Department. He has gone missing. And the third employee, Lin Sinan, the head of the Anti-Crime Department. She received an urgent task in the morning, and then went missing. Zhang Zai-hua believed that in the situation that has developed now, the labor force will obviously not be superfluous to him, because Ye Lan's strength is quite high and can be quite useful to them. The young disciple asked what to do with all these people now. Magician Zhang replied that it was definitely impossible to leave them here. They should be taken to a safer place in order to facilitate the investigation of this difficult case. The Taoist looked at his phone and told Lan that by a lucky chance there was a reliable car nearby, and asked the guy to take all the people there. The high school student immediately realized that the special department had tried it. Ye Lan said that he was very interested in how they would be able to hide such a large number of people from prying eyes, because this exhibition is quite popular, so it will obviously be filmed and posted online. Lan then asked if the Taoist magician's agency could hide such a strange phenomenon, because it was their job. He even heard that they talked about a natural gas leak and so hid what actually happened at school number 3 in Cheng City. The young magician picked up the spell sheet, showed it to his friend and said that he already had a solution to this problem. Ye Lan said that at first he thought that Zhang Zai-hua was a Taoist magician from Qiongqi, but it turns out that this is not the case at all. Zai-hua smiled contentedly and said that Qiongqi is the leader among the 3 mountain sects, and although their skills have their nuances, most of their methods are collected on Mount Longhu. He also added that it was perfectly normal for magicians like him to understand other arts. Finally, the young guy realized that Zhang wanted all these people to go to the car themselves. He said that these people with amulets on their heads in one place and in such numbers look very suspicious anyway. But at the same time, Ye Lan understood that since this is an anime exhibition, no one will pay much attention to how other people are dressed, so it was a pretty smart move. The schoolboy looked at Jihua with delight and a sparkle in his eyes and said that to be able to understand the Taoist tricks of his clan, and besides that, to be able to use the talismans of Mount Longhu, is really very amazing. The young magician was flattered that this child finally realized all his coolness. But Lan, as always, decided to add mockery. He smiled maliciously and said that since all the knowledge was mixed up in a heap, the Taoist is really just useless now. Taoist magician Zhang Zai-hua was unhappy with this statement of his new partner. Ye Lan was riding in a big bus with the lost people, and was sitting on 2 seats and put his backpack next to him, and on the way he stuck to his phone. then suddenly said that he found a video called Visitor BW was too carried away by the zombie scene, so now he has to leave a comment like I was there. Then the guy looked away from the phone and asked, so where are they going now anyway? Zhang Zihua, who was driving and carefully watching the road, said that it was too early to judge the condition of all their passengers, so for now they are going to a place where they can find someone who knows what to do with all this. Finally, the bus stopped and the young magician began to take people out of the vehicle one by one with the clinic of Old Man Liu. When the man in the suit entered the building, he saw an old doctor in front of him, who said that he had just had a very important client, so he had to drive away the employees of the department. The Taoist looked angrily at the doctor of the clinic and said that the lost fee for work and the fee for consultations are credited to the account of a special office, so a man should not neglect employees. The elderly man put his hands together, smiled sweetly, closed his eyes and said that it would be a great honor for him to accept a Taoist magician. Ye Lan was standing behind Zihua, and the manager immediately approached him and took his hand, but the senior student abruptly pulled his hand away and said that Old Man Liu was mistaken, because the patients were those 5 people with talismans on their foreheads that they brought, and not from at all. The man was not very happy. He looked at his patients, they had dull skin and tired eyes, so still the doctor said he would take care of them. The patients were placed on couches and carefully examined each of the victims. Lan and Zhang Zihua at this moment did not move a step away from the lost people. An elderly man, examining one of the new arrivals and opening his eyes and mouth, said that he had liver congestion, heart and spleen insufficiency, and very weak breathing. When the doctor finally finished the examination, he turned away and began to slowly wipe his hands with a napkin. The young magician looked at the old man and asked if he knew at least something that would help save them all. When Zihua was talking to the attending doctor on the one, the doctor was sitting at the table and said that all these patients had the same symptoms: high blood pressure, insomnia, and stomach problems. Magician Zhang was very surprised to learn such details of people's illness. The old man also could not understand how such young and strong people could have so many health problems. Then the Taoist magician asked if the doctor did not accidentally think that these patients were brought to him in order to cure their health problems. But the elderly man said that this was the whole diagnosis and handed the young man in the suit a code for payment, and then added that there should be proof of payment in their unit. And besides, there are things that cannot be stated on paper. Zhang Zihua transferred the payment for the sick. Then the old doctor began to tell, and the young magician listened to him attentively. He said that 2 entities that fight with each other are called gods. Those who come and go after the gods are called souls. The one who enters and exits with the entity is called spirit. Simply put, the soul that was once responsible for the thinking of all these people has been lost. However, the spirit that controls their bodies is still in place, so as a result they can only follow the instructions that the soul left them before its departure. The doctor also said that although such an organism will react weakly to external stimuli, they will still be no different from the so-called walking dead. Zihua immediately remembered how that fat man with glasses clapped his hands behind the stage. Old Man Liu went on to say that if the soul dissipates, then the spirit will also disappear in an instant, which is death for these patients in the literal sense. And vice versa, if the spirit is damaged, but the soul still exists, then the person will become just a vegetable. An elderly man often saw how the spirit disappears and the soul remains, but in this case it was quite the opposite. It seemed really strange, and the doctor said that he could only understand that the souls of all these people were pretty well preserved somewhere before they were taken away. The young Taoist did not understand why all this was necessary. Then the doctor asked if he should guess where and how a person caught a cold in order to take money for consultations, because then it would not be a doctor's appointment at all, but a trip to a fortune teller. The condition of the patients was such that if their bodies were restrained and kept alive by blood transfusion, they would probably be able to live for some time. However, the old man warned that if the soul does not return to its body for a long time, then it weakens greatly, so that the onset of death is only a matter of time. Zihua stood pensive and did not know what to do with it all. Meanwhile, the doctor got up from the table and went somewhere, saying that although he only had 4 beds, if the patients were left here, the bed fee would be charged twice as much, and he really hoped that Zhang Zihua would not be confused in any way. Magician Zhang looked at all these poor lost people and thought that Master Liu could only delay their death, but only for a while. They didn't even have the slightest clue about how these people became like this. The only thing that became known was that they all lost their souls about 2 days ago. But since the Baka Baka World Festival was only open for a few days, they must have become like this after it started, since they wandered there so calmly. so maybe the unclean is hidden in the institution itself. The young magician carefully rummaged through the halls of his memory and thought that before the start of the festival, some kind of large-scale performance seemed to be promised. If it was so easy to cancel, then it would obviously not end well, and there is no exact evidence. The case was too muddy and the man in the suit grabbed his head with his hands. Suddenly, imperceptibly, his new partner approached Zai Hua from behind and said that Magician Zhang just had to ask them about where it all happened. The Taoist turned around. The student came closer to him, put his hand on his shoulder and asked if he did not understand the Taoism of the three mountains. If so, then he should be able to use the method of fright. The young magician turned away and said that this method of fright only works on small children, and then not always. And they have people with a lost soul here, so I think this is clearly not their option. Besides, suddenly someone deliberately took the souls and using this method will not scare him off. Ye Lan smiled cheerfully and said that everything was fine, because everyone from the moment of birth is a scared child, and especially those who have no soul, so it's better to try than wait, otherwise all these people can just die and that's it. Then Zhang Zai-Hua said that this is the main reason. He said that the scare method can only be used in a person's permanent place of residence, so he photographs them all and sends them to the staff for research. The student was very glad that Magician Zhang finally agreed with his idea, and said that he had already checked their phone addresses himself. Most of them came from other places to participate in the anime festival, but the guy with glasses lives in the area where they are now, so you can just take him home. Zai Hua was very surprised by this child's intelligence and asked how he unlocked the phones. Ye Lan replied that there is absolutely nothing complicated about this, because you can simply remove the talisman from your face and use face unlock. When both guys looked away, they saw that all the patients were doing strange things. Some were just crashing into walls, and the frightened Dr. Liu rushed to save his medicines from them and demanded to stop immediately. Zhang Zai-Hua and his new partner watched what was happening in the clinic, and then the magician used his talismans again. Zhang Zai-Hua, with the help of a talisman and a spell, brought the guy with glasses to his house. Ye Lan said they were there. The young magician looked at the suitcase that was in his hands and kept saying that these were all ordinary things and old man Liu was asking too much, so sooner or later he should still report him to the police. All three entered the building and approached the right apartment. The Taoist went to the door and started knocking, asking if there was anyone in the apartment. At that moment, a deer ran up to him, asked if he was in his right mind at all, because it is impossible for someone to see a guy in such a state, otherwise they may have serious problems. And the schoolboy showed that he had a key while the landlord was standing next to them with a mascot on his face. Finally the door was opened and everyone entered the apartment. The magician and the high school student began to carefully look around and study the contents of this area. The disciple was holding the doll he found in his hands, and Zai Hua said that he did not feel the presence of any spiritual energy here at all, so he could only try to use the method of fright. The young magician opened his suitcase with the necessary things and began preparing for the execution of the method. The doe sat next to him and carefully watched the actions of his comrade. Zhang looked at disciple Yi with displeasure and said that once he starts, in no case will it be impossible to interfere, even if something unclean appears. Then he asked to remove the doll. Ye Lan said that everyone understood perfectly well that he had just never seen someone do it live before, so he would just watch what was happening closely. The Taoist magician began to walk around the room and paste up his talismans, and the schoolboy, as promised, did not interfere, but only watched him. Then Zai Hua took a glass of water and dissolved a pill in it. A deer ran up to him from behind and asked if it had started yet. Magician Zhang was displeased with such an abrupt appearance of his friend and was a little scared. Zhang Zai Hua asked Ye Lan to turn off the light in the room. When the light went out, the owner of the apartment was standing on the carpet, and the young magician stood next to him. He took some rolled up cloth, blew and flames flew from it in different directions. The magician began to talk about the threefold spiritual principle and the 7 heavenly spirits. Zhang Zai Hua was standing near the owner of the apartment and used the Tiger Mountain technique on him. Suddenly, he sharply shouted something about fright and about a lost soul. An incomprehensible spiritual energy was hovering around. Ye Lan was already standing without the doll and carefully watched what was happening in front of his eyes. He thought that it had been 3 whole years since the ebb and flow of the aura began and that this asshole in a suit was really good at his job and knew a lot of different tricks. Magician Zhang spoke about the disgust of the soul and the mastery of the body. Suddenly, what he was holding in his hands seemed to work and some red smoke appeared. The young magician was very happy. The schoolboy was also watching him with a smile on his face. The guy with glasses suddenly opened his eyes wide and shouted something unintelligible. A loud sound was heard from the computer that was standing behind, and a bright flash of light appeared. The owner of the room fell on the carpet, and Jiang Zihua fell after him. The hallway was still as quiet as before. In the room, 3 guys were lying unconscious. The bright light in the monitor went out and a red face with a sinister smile appeared on the screen. The door opened and 2 masked men entered the room. A guy with blonde hair asked why there was such a terrible smell in this room. Was there something burning here? The man with dark hair ignored his partner's question. He only said that he thought the elevator would fall with them. Then a third guy with long hair and a snake tattoo on his left arm entered the room. His name was Shige. The blonde man said that if they survived, he would treat Shiga to lunch after work. The long-haired man agreed and said that in that case they should finish everything here as soon as possible. Masked men approached Jiang Zihua. One of them shone a flashlight on him and asked if this was the man. While the 2 were examining the Taoist magician, the guy with the snake tattoo said that they were very noisy and they should clean up here. At that moment, Ye Lan had just regained consciousness and was about to attack the enemies, but a blonde man with a knife rushed towards him. The schoolboy's eyes turned red and he forcibly threw the attacker away from him. Shige immediately summoned his energy and prepared to attack. He quickly ran at the student, but he managed to jump up and the blow did not follow. The doe kicked his enemy from above in the back and broke his right arm. Shige screamed loudly in pain, and high school student E with one red eye said that people are really very strange. Ye Lan's enemy shouted loudly. When Ye Lan was walking to the club in his red raincoat, it was raining heavily, so he had an umbrella with him. Suddenly a man stopped him and asked about how old he was. The high school student looked at him with an intimidating look and the guard was scared. In the club, Lan saw a lot of people who were dancing merrily to the music. Then he focused his gaze on the 2 people who were standing and talking about something with each other. Passing by them, the deer found himself in the VIP room. There, a bald man named Kang Liang was sitting surrounded by beautiful young girls. There was a lot of delicious food and various drinks on the table. The student threw his black umbrella at the opponent, but he managed to react in time and immediately caught him. They looked at each other in silence for a while. On the table, everything fell from a flying umbrella. People hurried to leave the room, feeling clearly superfluous here. The bald man said that he thought that killing a child from Longhu Mountain was just a trifle and he did not expect that this child would be so precious. Ye Lan asked Kang if he was free now and abruptly ran up to him, intending to hit him, but he stopped the blow again. The red spirit told the owner that he hadn't made any progress after all. And Kang Liang said that Lan is still the same weakling who thinks that he really is one of the 12 exorcists. The high school student said that now that there are 12 restrictions on Kang Liang's life and his life is destroyed, he can't even compete with him, having only one of his 10 powers. Then the guy added that although he has not been on the list of the 12 exorcists for a long time, his scar still hurts sometimes. The people in the club heard a loud crash when Ye Lan threw his enemy against the wall so that it even cracked. The man quickly got up, walked up to the student, laughed merrily and hit him, saying that although the aura flow had not yet reached its maximum and he could not use all his strength, with as many restrictions as Ye Lan had on his back, he could still compete with him. Then the enemy turned away from the student and asked on the radio to bring the best dishes and drinks into the room. High school student E stood and scratched his head in incomprehension. Kang Liang invited his uninvited guest to talk in another room. Kang Liang poured a foaming drink into his glass and drank a little, and then said that he could not believe that Ye Lan still looked so good. The high school student was sitting on the couch at that time and asked the question how the bald man found out about his decline in strength. He said that violence is the most effective way to communicate, and precisely because they are both so cruel, they can sit here together and gossip. But then he added that if his guest wanted to get information from him, then he would have to communicate with him in a completely different way. And in order to force him to go over to his side, the doe must have at least such strength with which he could tear off his head. Kang Liang smiled cheerfully and asked if his friend would like to try it right now. Then high school student E stood up and said that Qiong should not be so arrogant, because he absolutely does not care whose side he is on. But there is one thing that Lan wanted to remind his interlocutor about. Ye Lan went to the door, turned around to look at the enemy and said that if he had known that Liang was involved in the incident that happened 3 years ago, he would have shown him exactly what real violence was. Finally, the high school student left the club, and, although the exchange of information was not very pleasant for him, Kang Liang still revealed 2 important things to him. Firstly, the Fangliang clan has already contacted Zhang Liang and revealed a force that can really threaten the Nuo door. Secondly, although the Fangliang clan found out about the existence of Lan, they have not yet begun to take any active action. In addition, the high school student was thinking about who sent Qiongqi to kill the guy from Longhu Mountain. Did it have something to do with Zhang Zihua? Ye Lan was walking under an umbrella because it was already dark outside and it was still raining quite heavily. He thought about how strange it was when someone underestimated you, and that now he definitely should work even harder. When Ye Lan was still very young and lived in Feng's old house, he often fought with his cousin. One day his uncle told Lan's grandfather about it. The boy tried to justify himself by saying that the guys were playing there, and he only wanted to catch a glimpse of them. But Fan Yidong accused him of being a foreigner who studies the secret arts of the Fan family. Then the child beat everyone. Grandpa asked him why he beat them up. Ye Lan said that at least he got into a short video, although he thought that the video would be longer. The grandson began to explain everything to the old man, waving his arms in different directions. Grandpa was delighted and said that it was really very interesting. Then the old man looked into his teacup with a drink and said that it was really the skill of the hands, and Ye Lan asked Grandpa what happened. Then the grandson said that now there is such a term for this as literature of nonsense, and asked if the old man had ever heard of it. The elderly man said that there was no need to talk empty words and gently stroked the little boy on the head. Then the grandfather and grandson went to their home, but before that, they put incense and bowed. The child asked the adult if it was possible for foreigners to enter such a place, and the old man replied that Ye Lan should not worry about it. The little doe also bowed. When he and his grandfather went to the exit, the boy saw a lot of masks that were let down and asked what it was. In response, he heard that these were masks worn by their ancestors in order to ward off evil spirits and protect the house. Then Lan noticed that these masks are almost the same as those that people wear for the new year. Grandfather said that everything is the same, they are almost the same, but only these exist for many hundreds of years and are passed down from generation to generation, and then asked which mask his grandson likes the most. The child said that all these masks were too ugly and asked if the old man accidentally wanted him to choose a mask for his New Year's Eve show. The boy came closer to the masks, pointed to one of them and said that the one that looks like a monkey is not so scary as all the others. Suddenly, Ye Lan's attention was attracted by a wooden, unpainted mask, which he saw in another corner separately from all the others. Her face was carved only with rough woodwork and it looked very much like it was the work of an apprentice, not a master. The rope on which the ancient object was hanging suddenly broke and the mask flew to the floor, but the boy managed to quickly run up and not catch it in time. The grandson looked at his grandfather and said that the mask had fallen by itself and there was absolutely no fault of his in this. The old man said that there was nothing senior about it and the deer could just go outside to the stairs for now, and he would hang the fallen thing back in its place. The child obeyed the adult and went, looking around at the same time in search of stairs. When Lan was looking for what his grandfather told him, he suddenly saw his mother lying down and saying something to her father. Then she saw her son and asked what he was doing here and where the old man was. Ye Lan explained everything that had happened to his mother. The woman understood everything and went to the hall to her father, but then suddenly turned to Lan and jokingly with a laugh unexpectedly hit him, saying that he was very naive. Mom began to squeeze her beloved son and said that she would talk to Grandpa for now, and then they would meet for dinner. Ye Lan asked Mom if they could stay here a little longer this time, and she replied that they would stay here until the 15th of the first month. No one has come to dinner yet, and little Lan was very attracted by the delicious smell of food on the table. He grabbed one delicious chicken leg and began to eat it. Then 3 more children came and they all started eating fragrant chicken legs together, sitting near the table. One boy turned to Ye Lan and asked if he had practiced. He replied that of course he had. The boy said that he would definitely share with Lan the secret technique of the Fan family. Lan asked if this child wanted him to use the hand technique with them. He asked what kind of hand technique it was, and then thoughtfully said that they could still shoot how they wave their hands, because he still has good hand speed. Then Lan covered his face with his hand, and then abruptly stood up. The cousin asked what was wrong with his cousin and promised to take Lan to a good place as soon as they finished, to a cave that his brother had found and where they decided to create a secret society. Ye Lan looked at Fang Yidong and said that lately it seems to him that he really is not such a bad person. Yidong asked what his cousin was talking about at all, because he had always been a pretty good person, but his father was asking him too many questions. He also said that he was very familiar with the Fan family area, so Ye Lan would be able to play with them later. But Lan knew perfectly well that there would never be any later. Is this really all that can be done? After all, the little boy has been waiting for this moment for so long. Currently, Lan was almost an adult, but he still regretted his childhood. For 3 long years, he wanted to go back to that day and stay there forever, but it was just his dream that would never come true. The student knew that the only dream that could sink him was the dream that began 3 years ago. Ye Lan was fighting monsters and was now, at this moment, very angry at everyone. He killed them one by one and shouted that it was time to start. Ye Lan was standing in front of a giant octopus-like monster with tentacles that had eyes. The monster was terribly scary. Information appeared in front of him that there was no need to panic, because this is the world of the Soul Explorer, and even if someone could destroy the illusion, the human soul would still not be able to move freely here. So it's time for real fun. High school student E rushed at the monster with green big eyes and attacked him. He used all his skills on it, and with a satisfied smile on his face I said that no matter what this world is called, he is in any case a real pro in battles in the form of a spirit. Suddenly, when Ye Lan didn't see him, a green-colored creature similar to a chameleon grabbed him from behind with its tongue. The tongue of this beast was like the tentacles of an octopus. Then the schoolboy grabbed this tongue with his bare hands and dragged the monster for it, and then hit the ground. Then he pulled the monster to him and kicked him on the head again, pressed on the head and tore off his tongue with his hands. When the young man threw the torn part of the flesh out of his hands, the other creatures looked at him with fear, and were not in such a hurry to attack. A high school student stared menacingly at his enemies, and their main one, an octopus-like monster, said that it was impossible to retreat in any case, because it was quite difficult to recover from damage to the soul. He added that even the smallest injuries can crush this person, so they simply have to show him everything they are capable of. This monster was spitting buttons from the keyboard and they were all flying straight at their target, at the person they wanted to kill. The system ordered Ye Lan to be killed, and monsters with weapons, some with bats, and some with knives rushed to attack their enemy. Then the guy said that he would never want to use it on them, but now he seems to have no other way out, so they should prepare for retaliatory actions. And the schoolboy used his power of the sun on his arm to fight. He looked menacingly at those who were going to attack him and realized that he could cope with them all. A golden staff with a sharp tip on one side and a long chain on the other appeared in his hands. The deer immediately rushed to attack, and someone else ran after him from behind. The student of school number 3 at that moment realized in which direction there was still a way out of this terrible place, where he was clearly not welcome. In front of him was a huge dump of completely different electrical appliances. He stood and studied it carefully. The monster that was spitting keys started climbing the wall, and Ye Lan saw this sight. He realized that this creature was only inciting other strange monsters to attack, but was not going to stay and wait for the outcome of all events, but simply climbed the wall without even looking back. High school student E took up his spear and thought that since there are walls here, but there is not a single door at all, then the exit may be somewhere upstairs. And the fact that one of the monsters decided to escape can be quite useful, because he will unknowingly lead his opponent to the right door. The doe threw his golden spear high into the wall, and he decided to climb up the chain that was at the other end of it. The spear quickly flew to the target and stuck right next to a nasty monster that looked like an octopus. Ye Lan jumped up, grabbed the chain and landed right on his weapon. The guy looked sadly at the octopus and said that he was very sorry, because if he had been at least a little faster, he might have been able to do it from here. But everything did not go according to plan, because the monster probably did not try hard enough. The monster screamed loudly, and high school student E repeated that this is the most real monster. Then he killed his enemy in cold blood and completely ruthlessly. The deer was in some strange place. There were various broken monitors and televisions. He looked carefully around the area, saw a clock that showed the time. It was exactly 14:08. The guy needs something. The countdown has started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The time on the clock suddenly became 14:48. Then the high school student realized that time seemed to be going completely differently in this place, so he should have accelerated a little. The deer saw some suspicious hexagon on the wall and wanted to run up to it, but said that the place for dispersal was clearly not the best. Still, he ran away, threw his weapon again and hit right on target. When the deer was inside, he saw small, but very ugly creatures that were carrying glass transparent coffins, larger than them in size. There was even a two-headed monster who was very scared when he saw how the creature next to him was killed by a blow to the head. The young guy did not stop there, and the turn of the two-headed one also came. Having dealt with them, the deer saw a lot of fragments that were lying nearby from the broken thunder that these creatures were carrying somewhere. High school student E thought that this was very suspicious, because he had just seen several exactly the same glass-like fragments when he was in the electronic ruins. At first he thought it was the remains of some broken screen or something similar, but now he seems to have realized that it was glass slits that fell into the channel and spilled. The deer went further along the empty, completely deserted corridor to the light. When he arrived, he saw something very strange and very frightening in front of him. There was something like a human cemetery, where some people were lying in transparent glass coffins. Among all these people, there was a guy Ye Lan knew for a long time. It was his old partner, the Taoist magician Zhang Zihua, and he was also lying in a coffin. Ye Lan carefully approached the transparent coffin in which his old friend was lying. He leaned on the glass with his hands and carefully examined Zihua. So he suddenly saw what, apparently, was now in the young magician's dream. There were smart people in old clothes and they were all waiting for someone. Fortunately, this dream even had subtitles. One old man in a dream told another that the future paths of the heavenly master are in the hands of the young, and probably there is no young man who would be as good as Zhang Zihua. But still, it's not time for them to retire yet. Behind these old men stood a contented and happy Taoist magician. Schoolboy Yi wiped the sweat from his forehead and thought that this guy was really lying here in a coffin and dreaming of his promotion. Although the guy was not sure that this was a promotion for Taoists. Suddenly, in the dream of magician Zhang, Ye Lan himself appeared, who told him how incredibly cool he was and that he wanted to learn a lot from him. He said that he was not even close to the elite, because his brother Zhang was really strong and only he could teach him everything. Then the high school student could not stand such humiliation and began to knock on the glass coffin, and Zihua suddenly came to his senses. Zhang woke up and wanted to get up, but hit the glass. Lan then said that he could not even imagine that his words would have such a strong influence on his friend. Finally, the magician Zihua got out of his imprisonment, looked at the savior and said that since he could joke now, then the situation was not as bad as he might have thought. After his release, the Taoist magician began to remember what had happened to him. He said that the last thing he has in his memory is how they tried to use a scare spell in one guy's house. Then something lit up brightly, like it was a computer. The doe walked around, looked around and said that it looked like this was how the souls of the others were stuffed into this place. He added that the plan they were preparing probably worked, but not quite as they needed, although in the end they still found their way to this place. The young magician began to look at his hands and body. He suddenly realized that they were here only in the form of souls that were sucked into the computer. Zhang was greatly outraged by such a virtual reality game. He got up, went somewhere, but suddenly stumbled and fell. Then I went to one of the coffins and saw a guy's dream. In a dream with a guy there was a young and very beautiful girl. Ye Lan said that actions in the world of souls are similar to actions in a dream. He asked if his friend did not feel that he could not control his powers or use them when he was in a dream. The guy added that if the Taoist is not used to this yet, then it will be quite difficult for him to go further. Zihua got up and followed the schoolboy, while saying that he perfectly understood what he was driving at, and then asked how the deer could safely move here. The high school student turned around, looked at the young Taoist with a smile, and said that it was because he was just much better than him, and besides, he did not sleep for days on end, unlike some. Magician Zhang grabbed his head and said that this young guy was clearly going to drive him crazy soon. But now was not the time to think about such things, it was worth focusing on the main problem. He was well aware that if there is a stolen soul in each of these glass chambers, then the victims found at the venue of the Baka Baka World Festival are just the tip of the iceberg. Besides, if you can just get a soul through a screen like that, then you can get an entire country that way. The magician could not understand who was capable of such an action. Ye Lan wandered around, but still listened to what his friend was saying and said that he did not know if there was any organization related to this, but if Zhang Zihua wanted to know who did it all, then he could give him an answer right now. Looking at the glass coffin, one could see the contents of the soul's dream, and the high school student discovered that half of these souls were filmed by the same girl before being imprisoned, so it probably can't be a coincidence. Zhang Zihua looked at all these coffins with surprise, and then asked how long Ye Lan had been examining them. Lan said that the girl was Ranji, a virtual idol whose popularity had been growing quite rapidly since the debut. Almost all the victims were her fans. Zihua said something about a virtual idol, and Lan explained that, simply put, this is an anime girl who conducts live broadcasts in a two-dimensional image using a special technique. But the young magician Zhang was indignant, saying that he himself knows who the virtual idol is. The guys watched the dream of one of the souls and wondered if it was even possible to watch it for free. The Taoist closed his eyes for a moment from the brightness of the image and said that if there is a way to steal a soul through the screen of some device, Then there is probably a more normal way than pretending to be a virtual presenter. Then his partner replied that in this case, this is exactly the most ideal way for the criminal who is behind all this. He reminded Zai Hua of the words that a Chinese doctor told them at the clinic, that it was very difficult to take out the soul of a healthy person. But all the victims found at the festival suffered from severe insomnia that exhausted them both physically and mentally. It is easy to take away the soul of those who do not go to bed for a long time, simply by setting the time of live broadcasts for late evening. In addition, Ye Lan said that most of the dreams of these souls show that they had good feelings or even love for Qiongqi. He suggested that this is the main reason that their souls are here now. The guy said that many young people are wary of real people, but virtual ones, on the contrary, to some extent even attract them. Lan believed that this probably happens because subconsciously they think that they will definitely not suffer if they fall in love with a virtual girl, which is why they lose their vigilance so easily. Zhang Zihua said that it is quite possible that his friend's guesses are correct, because mostly only Qiongqi fans who also have health problems suffered. But in that case, why did the two of them also end up in this place? A high school student said that probably someone had to try hard to drag them here, because in the end, if every soul could be sucked through a computer screen, then there would definitely be a lot more of these coffins. According to Lan, there was also good news, and it was that although Qiongqi is the most popular virtual idol, the audience of her broadcasts is still not that big. He put his hand on one of the coffins and said that since the number of people who watch her broadcasts is not so large, there probably shouldn't be any victims in the near future. Zhang Zihua suddenly realized that he had already heard or seen the name of this girl, Qiongqi, somewhere. It was at anime festivals. Host Qiongqi was supposed to perform at the closing ceremony of Baka Baka World, along with other virtual idols. Then Ye Lan said that the closing ceremony of the festival is a grand show called Baka Baka Dream Link or BDL. He knew that this was the most important event for the Ba Channel company, which would use hologram equipment that would allow virtual idols to perform on the same stage with live artists. Last year alone, more than 30,000 people attended this event, and if you also turn on the live broadcast, it will be just a great opportunity to see what awaits everyone. Both guys were looking at each other. They were thinking the same thing now. No matter what the performance of this virtual girl was, she should not be allowed to perform in front of so many people in any case. In this case, they definitely could not be idle. They should find a way out as soon as possible in order to have time to interrupt the BDL. Ye Lan walked up to one of the guys in the coffin and started doing something. Zhang Zihua wanted to stop him and asked what he was doing. Although the young magician noticed that his partner was quite observant during the incident with the ghosts, it is still impossible to reach such a high level with a simple practice. It is simply impossible. But still, the fact that high school student Yi traveled all this way without the slightest hesitation means that he managed to identify a particular person from 1,000 dreams with just a few looks. Does this mean that there might be something wrong with Lan's eyes? The schoolboy pointed his finger at the coffin at which he was standing now and said that this soul was the only one that had ever left this dimension. So it is likely that there is a way out of this world in this world of dreams. If you think of everything as a special system, then most likely this person is like a glitch in the program, so that they would be able to use his dream to find a way out of this dimension and return to their bodies. Zihua looked at his friend angrily and asked if he had not anticipated such an outcome of events when he had just offered him the method of fright. Ye Lan laughed and said that it would be quite possible, because he is very smart. But this is just an assumption based on the available facts, and it is quite possible that the soul of the young magician accidentally entered the world of dreams of that guy and thus got here. After studying the dreams of all people, a high school student concluded that most of them dream about love. But this person has a dream about the best assassin, reborn in another world as the seventh son of a noble family, where a noble old man treats his grandson well. It is clearly very difficult to find a way out of such a dream. Zhang Zihua was indignant and asked what kind of dream is this? Is this guy's dream ever to get into the world of novels? He asked when the doe decided that they needed to enter his dream. High school student he said that he probably realized this the very moment he saw what a rich imagination his partner had. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard. The guys turned to the coffins and saw how someone began to die. Ye Lan said that this is probably what the old herbalist told them. Even if a person loses his soul, and somehow his body does not die immediately, then he will only be able to live for a few days. It's only a matter of time before death comes for the body. The young magician cursed and asked what they should do now. The high school student said that if Zihua could lie down in a coffin and enter his dream world, then he would have to deal with the rest himself anyway, since he had things to do. Lan said that before he woke up his friend, he had a little run-in with a security guard. He initially believed that the opponent would continue to send his guards to him, but he could not expect that his opponent would also play by the rules. There was a girl walking in front of them. It was Ranji, and the student said that the reason that the main enemies are called behind the scenes is that they never come out. Virtual idol Ranji said that they shouldn't be too hard on themselves. She is a virtual beauty idol who brings dreams and hopes to all people. Zhang Zihua looked at the girl very carefully and said that she was really very nice, but his partner clearly did not think so. He looked at the young magician with displeasure. Rongji said there was no excuse for these guys disturbing the dreams of many people in this place and harshly attacked Ye Lan. Fortunately, the guy managed to wave off his golden chain and create a big shield in front of them.